Is there a air trash when you guys are Oh, it's a red one. Don't the high school activity thing. But that's it. I didn't feel that. How do I reconcile this? What are you doing? Reconcile that. Where'd you go? Great. I think it's
Really?
I think there's a market.
Never, ever, never. Have that sensation. Or might if I-
Oh, really? Actually,
Like, and also,
they're getting married there, so we met.
Was that
The daughter,
Cheryl last in our prior version as well? And I just missed out.
So we had a very nice big meeting. Yeah, they're they start having it every 2 weekends a year. Family 200.
Hello, how are you?
Maybe
So Seth survived the great dig out. Yeah.
it's been good time.
Comped into 1, 5, 2, 3.
Oh, it's really.
Had I tweaked my back a little bit.
Let's go. Glass better. You want me to say?
It's really not. It's small. It's not enough to say. She's from Rochester, and so the kids, they're in Chicago right now. They didn't want to get married there. They thought about Boston. This is a difficult destination wedding, but I think for her family it's easy to get to. Our friends are and our friends are more than happy.
That's the old version.
5 minutes. Like, you get up there, and their friends are
This is number 4 after that.
especially when they got married and, apparently one more month than the rest. Way out of my league, but this will be good. Okay, not really,
It was noticeable immediately. Like, immediately.
yeah. 3 years old. Yeah. Wow.
What do you think? Feeling it?
Quick shakes.
Yeah.
Ready?
Hey, on the girls.
All right, welcome everyone.
And Josh is, I mean,
We are
Recording
ready
in
to
progress.
I know, it's call to order the February 2nd, 2026 meeting of the Newton School Committee. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a 5th grader from Memorial Spalding with us today, Ronnie Lavari, if you'd like to come forward. There's a mic with your name on it. There's no obligation to participate, but for those willing and able, please rise. Whenever you're ready, Ronnie, you can get going.
What do we look?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ronnie, if there's anything you want to tell us about being a student at Memorial Spalding, you can. Or you can say no, thank you.
You want to say a couple of things about being a student in Memorial Spalding? Say a couple of things about what do you like about Memorial Spalding?
Loud.
Yes. Loud, slowly.
Use one of these. Use one of these.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can. Talk to them. Yes, talk to this.
A few things I like about Memorial Spalding is that one of them is that the people there are very kind. Like I made a lot of friends there and they're very kind and they also like are very fun to be around and they make really good people.
Lovely. Well, we've heard amazing things from your principal about you, so congratulations on being selected to be here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Excellent. Well, first fifth grader of the year, thank you. We will move to public comment for this evening, our first public comment of the year also. So this is time reserved for members of the public to address the school committee and for committee members to directly hear your concerns and perspectives. We will not respond during the meeting, but we will listen and consider feedback. Community members may also reach out directly to school committee members, any or all of us. Individual website, email addresses are on the website, so please look there. We will have with one remote speaker and one in the room. For the remote speaker, please make sure that your Zoom name matches your name that you used to sign up. In-person speakers, we will let's start in person with Maura Siegel. You'll have up to 3 minutes. At the 2.5 minute mark, Jason will channel his best Emily Prenner and gently let you know that you have 30 seconds left. And if you could start by stating your name and address, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Maura Siegel. I am a resident of Newton 39 Anawan Road. The last minute, as I was reading the materials around the math progress, I felt an urge to come up and share my thoughts. I've spent a career in education. I have worked alongside superintendents and chief academic officers across Massachusetts and across the country. Most recently, I'm a co-founder of an organization called Leading Now that works with superintendents nationwide to support their leadership to advance a great education for all kids and to navigate the complexities of change management to do that. So I have the privilege of being alongside about 300 different superintendents a lot. And so through that lens, I want to say that I am so impressed by the progress, Dr. Nolan, you've been making with the math leadership. I have the privilege of knowing Dr. Nolan through some of this shared work in the field. And it blows me away, the degree to which you and the school committee and your team have been leading with intentionality, have been listening carefully, have been looking to find common ground. But most importantly, you've been centering on what matters most, which is to ensure that all children in the district have access to the rigorous and engaging mathematics instruction that they both deserve and that they need to have to be ready for the future. It is no hard task to lead a change management effort of this level. It is no hard task to do it, especially in mathematics, which is notoriously a very difficult subject to instruct in throughout all the grades. And it is no hard task because the future of what future readiness is uncertain and evolving all the time. And so with all of that as immense challenges, the courage and conviction and thoughtfulness and leadership that you are all showing in this journey that of course is hard, is bumpy. You're not gonna make friends every day in this work because it involves change, but I just wanna say stay the course. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Online, we have Simuk Tendulkar. Simuk, are you?
Am I good? Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Sumukh Tendulkar, 137 Anavan Road. I live down the street from Mora, really. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. I read the math update slides and look forward to details that will be discussed tonight. I do want to start saying I'm genuinely excited. The future middle school and high school pathway slides show we are finally headed in the right direction and back to where we were, or possibly better, after the turn our administrators took before COVID. But I want to share 3 observations or suggestions that may be obvious to many, but not to all. First, on governance. This change was made by our well-meaning administrators. The school committee did not vote on this significant curriculum shift. Some members spoke in favor, I guess, others against, and frankly, some I couldn't figure out. Madam Chair, I urge you to consider putting curriculum-related changes like this to vote rather than just discussing them. You are our elected representatives. You should vote based on your discussion with the what administration tells you and what you believe serves our student best. Second, on urgency. Every single year is a critical part of students' middle school or high school experience. I see that the high school changes kick in 2027. I believe we cannot afford to wait. We already waited 6 years for this. I strongly recommend we look at implementing these changes at high school level as soon as possible, ideally this coming school year. Third, on scope. This is just math. We need similar reviews for other content-based subjects. I know that is already in the works. I would say our curriculum options lags peers such as Lexington and Needham. Again, in spirit of providing optimal experience for future high school students, let's look at what our peer districts like Needham and Lexington are doing successfully and adopt those models as an interim solution. In parallel, we can develop our own perfect approach. Our students deserve rigorous, well-designed pathways in all subjects, not just math. This update represents a significant step in the right direction. I urge this committee and administration to act in haste for other subjects as well. Thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. We will move to the consent agenda, which consists of meeting minutes from January 26th and 2 out-of-state field trips. Is there anything a member would like to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing nothing, is there a move to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Awesome. Second, anyone? Okay, let's vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7 is a yes, 8.
Yes.
Mayor Laredo.
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda has passed 9-0. We can move to our discussion items for this evening. We do have a very meaty agenda tonight, and I'm going to aim to keep us to a 9:30 adjourn time, recognizing that our final item might need to be taken up at a later meeting. So I just want to preface with that, and we'll start with the superintendent's update.
So the superintendent gave a doubly long one last time, and knowing the length of this meeting, she will refrain from a superintendent's update tonight.
It's the topic you've all been waiting for. Let's go to the math update.
Okay. I don't think you're first, Liam. Okay, we thought we were going to take up fees first.
Oh, do you want to take up fees first?
It might be best. Yeah.
All right, we can take up fees first.
Okay.
Fine.
Ready?
That is okay.
So this is Liam Hurley, our CFO, and Eva Hughes, our Director of Humanities, who oversees the music lesson program. Just in case you wanted to share some of the questions that you shared with us, she can answer some of those questions. Just so the public knows, school committee submits us some questions prior to our meeting in case we want to have the answers in the meeting. That way the public isn't in a perpetual loop of like, when do the answers come? They're right here. So Eva is here to answer any questions, but Liam has also put the answers into our fee memo as well.
Great, good evening. Thank you so much. We did have Eva Hughes here as well, so maybe we could start potentially with the music lesson program. So we've gone back, we had the first kind of round of recommendations from you folks, a bunch of questions and some feedback that we had on that. We've put some percentages in. We've also put some rationale in terms of looking at that, in terms of why we're looking for some additional fees. In the past, we have not used kind of benchmarks of, if we're at 45% for a certain piece, let's look for everything to be at a certain percentage. But I do think that, that makes some sense to doing that. But we have not looked at that in the past, so it's an interesting perspective. But in a moment, maybe I can get into that. But I think if the committee would like, I wanted Eva to be able to kind of weigh in on the music lesson extension program that she gave a memo about. And so I think you folks understand what that program is and what it's not as well. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Urban Hughes, the Director of Humanities for Social Studies and for Fine Arts. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the Music Lesson Extension Program. This is an after-school program that is run for students across the Newton communities. It is not to be conflated with the in-school programs that also run for the 4th and the 5th graders. And I just wanted to be very clear that there's a distinction between these. These are individual private lessons that happen after school that are largely coordinated. The content of my memo are largely coordinated by my office and by myself. The content of the memo was asking to have an increase in essentially the wage of the music lesson extension program instructors. I'm having a hard time getting instructors for this particular program because I don't think the rates have gone up in almost 10 years. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions that you have about that very specific program, as opposed to other music programming that you might have.
So one of the members submitted a couple of questions that I just want to make sure I honor those questions. There were some questions about, like, is there any way that we can test the market on whether that would hire or not? I think you've been doing some querying in the marketplace.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to why you think this recommendation is the way to move forward in the market?
Well, I do, and I would suggest raising the wages for music lesson extension program instructors because, well, first of all, they haven't been raised in 10 years. But if you were to take a look at what private lessons cost across, Newton and surrounding areas, in many cases they're upwards double what they would cost in the music lesson extension program. I also want to be clear about where those fees go. So when a parent pays to have those lessons, all of that money goes directly to the instructor, minus a $25 registration fee, which is collected by the district. And so that money is then paying them directly. I'm having a hard time keeping instructors because they can go and work in a different music program and get significantly more money. And so as a result, I cannot, right now I don't have, for example, a strings instructor. And as a result, I've had to turn a lot of families away, that were unable to do that. The intent of the program, to be clear, is to be able to offer affordable lessons for folks that are just kind of testing the waters, for children that might have an interest in an instrument. It really is community service in many ways. And so right now, what the market is bearing is that I can't keep instructors because they don't want to work for this low of a wage. I will say that I received a letter from 4 of the instructors that are no longer with us, saying that they would accept what I recommended as appropriate wages because they believe in the mission of the program. And the mission of the program is to be able to offer affordable lessons in a familiar building. They're offered at the middle schools largely. And in a lot of cases with music teachers, like elementary music teachers that are doing, in my opinion, a community service by working for the program. So that was my request.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, Ben, and then Alvarado.
Thank you for that update. That's helpful. My question is, should we be setting the rates for the teachers or allowing them to declare their own rates and passing those through?
Oh, you mean for the instructors? Well, again, it's what should we be allowing them? Well, you don't have to, certainly you don't have to. However, If we don't meet what's currently in the market, I will be unable to staff this particular program. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I'm
We
asking.
need to go out to bid for a proposition, like you're saying, like they can't dictate it. You set the rate and they meet the rate.
Yeah.
If we were to go out to bid for a music lesson company to provide the service, then that we would get several bids and then we would say, we would choose the bid that we liked and they would pitch whatever bid they wanted to pitch.
Can we not run a process where anybody who chooses to list their service with us can list their no, why?
Because we are not a vendor for outside consulting practitioners
Okay.
of any type. That would be tutors, that would be music lesson instructors, any outside vendor.
Loreto?
Thank you. So obviously the program serves a very good purpose, which is to provide somewhat more affordable music lessons to children, particularly those who may not be sure where they're going with music. So I have two questions regarding that. One, do we do any tracking of the kids who go through this program to see where they go after that? In other words, do they dabble a little bit and say, this is not for me, which actually may be just fine? Or do they then go and take private lessons elsewhere? Do they go into our high school music programs? Any idea where our kids end up?
I have no way of being able to give you like strict numbers on that specifically, but I will tell you that the goal of the K through 12 music program in general, from my perspective, is very much to keep kids in the program and to be able to make sure that they get the best instruction possible, so that we can then have very healthy middle school as well as high school programs. And this is a small part of that. And being able to provide private music lessons, because many, many students take private music lessons, not through us, but through private vendors. And then many of them end up potentially going to the New England Conservatory and other programs outside of Newton Public Schools. And so by strengthening the music program with Newton students in our public schools and being able to then create a pipeline into the middle school program, then ultimately into the high school program, is good for the overall music program.
You know, if it would be, it seems to me, interesting to find out where the kids go after that. Second, somewhat unrelated question, I think it was in your memo. Is this a program that should be taken over by Newton Community Ed at some point?
Well, that is one of the models that's being kicked around. We're unsure of whether NCE can take that on right now, since they are, of course, running up a hill from their own deficit with their current programming. So certainly something to explore.
It seems to me that this might be a very good program for Newton Community Ed, but not a decision we need to make right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Victor?
Thank you very much for being here, and more importantly, for keeping music alive in the community. So that's I think I'm a musician myself, so I care about that a lot, and I appreciate that, violinist. I think you highlight some really good points. That affordability is, I think, the key here, and then what I'm trying to wrestle with is, you mentioned, if I heard you correctly, that there's 4 instructors that have said that this proposal would be enough to, for now, motivate them to stay. I guess my first question is that you mentioned strings as being one area of opportunity. Are those 4 including string teachers, or are they in brass, or yeah?
No, so they are including the strings teachers. But there's also no guarantee that even if the rate for them increases, that I can get them to come back into the program. But this is what they had asked for.
So to be transparent, where I'm thinking, like, I'm part of me is wondering, is it even enough, to be honest, to be competitive? I don't frankly know if the right comparison is the, all Newton Music School or NEC or any of the private markets. Part of me is wondering, what are districts that are doing this? What other kind of market rates are those folks? Not expecting you to have that answer, but just to shed some light on my thinking. The other question, I guess, is some of these increases, as I understand it, are somewhere between, like 22%, maybe $6 here, $12 on the 60-minute basis. Do we have any sense from the families who are participating right now whether that is going to be a significant enough, is that going to be a burden, I guess, on them, to the extent where you think that would actually change not just the supply side, but the demand side from?
I think that's a very good question. There's really no way to know. I will tell you, just anecdotally, that in my own community, my daughter has been taking private music lessons through actually a community-based organization that's run out of the schools. And I am paying double what the current rate increase that I'm suggesting here. And so this is, I think, significantly below market value, which isn't attractive for a lot of folks. So I think the balance here is how can we still pay instructors enough in order to be able to keep them in the program, while at the same time be able to, keep the philosophy of the program, which is to offer music lessons for everybody. This is also not a program, I'll add, that has any scholarship attached to it. It is completely voluntary. It's, again, after school, and it's on the side.
And this is the last question. This might be a little arcane here, but are the folks who are participating as instructors, the mindset reminds me of like El Sistema and those kind of programs, right? That sort of mission minded, if you would focus. Are we talking about folks that are overlapping with those kinds of communities, or are these very distinct folks that have been part of the Newton system for a longer time? I'm just trying to get a sense of where in the community.
I inherited this program this year.
Yeah.
So I'm new this year. And what I saw from the previous instructors, that these are largely teachers that are in the district, that are, doing these after school music lessons in order to be able to keep the music program alive, right? And so that's kind of the core group of instructors that I have. I mean, I did try to, through School Spring, which is our recruitment, our recruitment platform here in the district across schools, try to hire folks to come and do it. And I did get some candidates to come. Largely they took on 1 or 2 students, and then one of them took on none at all. And so I just haven't had a whole lot of success outside of folks that are invested in Newton students.
Very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Do we as a committee have to set a point rate for these through a policy? Like, do we actually have to set $33 and $49.50 as the rates for this? Or do we have the power? Like, it feels like the incentives here are good, right? And we're creating, nobody's trying to make money on this. All the money goes directly back to the instructors. It's clearly below cost of the private lessons. The thing that I think we care about in this is that we have the ability to attract enough instructors to meet some description of, some element of demand. Is there a reason that we can't or shouldn't give Ms. Hughes a $5-10 window in which she can manage the program and set a rate that ensures that we have a program that works without having to come back to us for 50 cents in 6 months if it turns out that we're not getting there?
You absolutely can set a range.
Should we do that?
I would suggest that given the other fees we need to discuss and whatnot tonight, we may want to stick with the proposal on the table. I love the idea of a range. We will also be undertaking more sort of guiding principle type views on fees in general. And this could be wrapped into that. If it goes to NCE, our ranges don't matter. So I think for expediency, suggest we stick with the proposal and vote on that.
I am supportive of this proposal if you believe that it will allow you to hire the instructors you need to make the program work.
I'll certainly try.
Gonna give it a go.
Right, Tamika?
Thank you, Alicia. Sorry, gentle reminder to look to the right every now and then. Linda, you've been waiting a while. So I applaud the efforts. I think they're worthy of having this type of a program in place. I don't think it's something core to the Newton Public Schools. We do have music instruction that happens within the bounds of the school day. There are many various perspectives on whether we can offer more or whether it's sufficient, but we have it. This feels to me, and it is, in fact, something beyond the school day. It's extra. It's under the caveat of enrichment, worthy enrichment. But we, to one of the gentleman's point, we don't know if the return on our investment is seen at the high school. We are struggling to ensure that we have proficient, competent folks, that there's been variable quality of instruction, seeing as NPS educators have withdrawn from from curating this program. So I think you definitely alluded to the desire to have NCE step in and adopt or anoint, take over, whatever vernacular, take over this program. And I think it would be to our mutual benefit, the families that are, or the students that are taking these classes, and certainly to NPS and the administrative side to furnish that offshoring of this program ASAP, as soon as possible, due to the fact that there's other agencies that can do this better, that would have a more fluid time, a more nimble time of adjusting to the market demands to get the best instructors for our students. So that would be my perspective. I think, sure, giving flexibility to you as the director to be able to get that sweet spot that gets that, you know, really talented music instructor and match that instructor with a student who's looking to have that particular lesson, that would be great. But even better, and certainly much more direct and productive, would be to have somebody else take on that task, because other groups do it. And so NCE, as a community offering, they can raise grants to reduce their costs that they're providing to families. It's just a matter of whether we are continuing to fund this or support it within the bounds of our program. And I don't know if my personal view is it's not something that we should take on very much longer. That's just a comment.
Anyone else?
I would just say I agree 100% with what Tamika just said. I also agree with, I think it was Jonathan's idea on the range. And if you know, expediency is critical this evening, I would just suggest we offer a $5 range from what was proposed. I would also agree that, you know, my concern is you can't get the teachers this year. And if we could just call it a day with providing a $5 range, with also the acknowledgement that the goal is ultimately to move this over to Newton Community Ed.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just want to say that it's critical that NECP gets their rate tonight. We are already behind for the preschool matriculation, and so we do need some decisions to get made. I understand that this committee has a new orientation to how you might want to roll with this in the future. You have our commitment that we will sit with you in the peace and quiet of summer and make all our dreams come true for next fall. But right now we're sort of betwixt and between if we don't have these rates to start signing up and hiring and doing all those pieces.
Victor?
Would you entertain a motion at this time regarding this, or would you prefer to hold?
Does anyone want to review the other fees? We're sort of looking at these as a
That's
package.
a good question. Yeah, I'll hold it.
Okay. Jonathan?
I have a question about the other fee memo.
Okay, start there. Go ahead.
We're moving on to that.
Let's do it.
Okay. I was wondering if maybe, so I have two questions. The first is, on reading this again, I sort of noticed on the first page, it says there's a total of $3.8 million in fee revenue projected. The table at the back seems to add up to 5.
Yeah.
How do I square that circle?
Good point. Thank you. Sorry for any confusion. So a few of these are basically self-funding program. For example, Newton Space, that's not considered a fee revenue for us. That basically covers its own, it basically just covers its own program expense. So we don't think of that as it's
So the one in, one out, the created
so
what's available to
that's
go to
exactly
other
right.
programs.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's there's several of these that are basically pass-throughs like that. I can go through and kind of, you know, take a look at that. But that's
what I needed
the main
to know.
piece.
Yep. Thank you. My second question is, it looked like the only substantive difference between the two versions of the memo were the elimination of the high school activities fee. Is that correct? Or did I miss something?
There's also an additional building use fee, set of fees.
There's an additional building use fee.
Our after-school providers are B and C permit holders and language schools.
Yep. So the first recommendation did not have what's called USB, which stands for Use of School Building or Facility Rentals. We charge users in the community. We've got a series of rates there. So there's a memo here, and there's really effectively two recommendations. One is to increase the after-school providers to go. And what we do, it's a little bit of an odd rate, but it's basically 50 cents per student hour that we charge them. We increased that last year, and it was a larger increase. This increase is the recommendation was to go from 50 cents per hour to 52 cents per hour, generating a little bit of revenue for us. Obviously, they obviously generate their revenue from charging families for their after-school programs. The second piece in the USB is our what are called our room rates. We if people rent space, we charge them for custodial time, and then we have basically a rate depending on if it's a classroom, an auditorium, a cafeteria, that type of thing. And so we're increasing those rates on those. We did some of that. We didn't touch a few of spaces that Tamika, Eagle Eye Tamika saw that on a few of these. So we actually went back, looked at that. It wasn't significant revenue that we were that we didn't think we would produce, but we increased that rates as well for some of those. We've got our three language schools, that we call them. We've got kind of a 5-year phased in approach, so I did not recommend any changes to those programs. And what we do with this revenue, all this money comes into what's a revolving account, and that money goes into pay overtime for our custodians. And I think this part has been a little bit confusing. This overtime basically covers not only the time that they're actually covering the use of school building participation, but any other additional events that we've got going on through the school. So we've got many other events that happen. We've got overtime for things that are, when we've got buildings really freezing temperature, we've actually have sometimes building checks during a weekend that we may have custodians go in. Unrelated to USB, we actually have to pay overtime. If we've got something major happening, a major event, not just USB, we'll incur overtime. So our goal, and last school committee's goal, was to actually get this USB revenue to cover all, and we're not quite there. We're very close. All of the overtime revenue, all the overtime expense. At some point, we've not yet made, if we can surpass that at some point, we could think about using some of that revenue potentially to cover some building maintenance or offsetting utilities, things like that. But right now, all that money has been going to basically cover overtime. So we're quite, in most districts, there's a large line item. In fact, a number of years ago, the custodial line item in Newton was almost $1.2 million. I think it's down to about $35,000 right now because the USB offset. We've done a nice job collecting that, and we've started to really increase those rates.
That's a mental model goal, though, not some sort of statutory.
That's
you can
exactly
only
right.
spend this money on these
That's
things.
right. So the school, we could change that. The thing I would say is that revenue, USB revenue, probably should be associated with some type of building component. Meaning revenue, yeah. So a revenue typically associated, the expense typically associated with the revenue. Right. That's the typical rule of thumb.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Linda?
Liam, thank you so much for all the hard work in putting this together. And I appreciate the additional background that you provided us. I think the one thing that I am hung up on is the different percentage of the total cost that each activity is. And I appreciate it may be really challenging to get them all to the same percentage in a given year. Yeah. But are we striving to eventually move towards that? I think in particular, I was looking at those high school sports relative to high school production, drama production, and our fees are covering so much greater percentage on the sports. And I'm really concerned about that number, $480, I think it is, per sport, is a lot. And so it was just, what is that goal that we're striving for in terms of percentage?
You know, that's a great question. And so I think I started by saying we have not actually had this as kind of a context of how we've looked at fees. And I think I think it's a great new lens that you folks are bringing to this. I know Amy, who's here with us, has gone in and she was the one, thank you, Amy, kind of going back and look and kind of getting some of these percentages in here. Comparing programs with each other is actually a very difficult exercise. In many ways, it's very difficult. For example, the productions are actually very difficult because there are a number of other things that go into those productions that are not even just in our budget. The students are paying for different things in different ways. There's also programs, you know, PTOs are paying, covering fees.
Namely, that we salary the instructors versus the coaches are stipended.
Stipended,
So
yeah.
there's just some basic differences.
I agree. So I think, I mean, I'd love Amy to weigh in, but I think I would look, you know, if the school committee had a targeted goal to say, look, we're looking for a minimum of 50%. I don't know the number, but for example, transportation, we're not there. We would need to charge significantly more in transportation. There was questions about, you know, what are the transportation, the rules in transportation were mandated to provide transportation in kindergarten through 6th grade for students that live more than 2 miles. So believe it or not, that would significantly reduce the number of buses, the number of costs. Now, I'm not recommending that. We'd have terrible traffic. Families would have a terrible night, terrible time, but it would be a significant budget reduction for us to go from about 34 in city buses to probably 5 or 6 potential buses. We would no longer collect fees, but you would basically be meeting the law. So one, I think if the committee had some ideas on, you know, do we have a percentage we want to shoot for? I would put to you folks. And then Amy, any perspective you want to add? You really kind of started digging in on these percentages that you want to throw into it.
I would just reinforce what you said, Liam, that we haven't looked at the fees with that metric before. It's a great new additional metric to look at. I think we've looked at where we've been, what are reasonable increases, and then what are the needs of each program. Particularly the athletic program, I've worked very closely with both of the two high school programs the last several years, and their needs always exceed what the fee revenue and what the district revenue allows for in the program. So it's a toss-up, quite honestly, between trying to provide them with the additional funding that they feel that they need to run the program and offer the program to the athletes in the best way possible, and also being financially feasible for the participants to engage. At the higher rates that we first presented, they were very concerned that they would lose participation, and that's a fine line that we don't want to get near.
Good. Okay. Jason, then Tamika.
I very much agree, Linda, with the spirit of, I think if I'm playing it back right, is making sure we have fairness in the rates. We are thinking about the things that we've heard everyone speak about, access for folks, that it's not making it hard for people to participate. You know, my sense is, even if we haven't done the sort of, I have like an orchestra back there.
Listeners at home, it's the heat turning on.
My sense is, if we haven't really done all of the math on the fully loaded costs, et cetera, I think what we're hearing is that's something that we just don't have the time and space to do right now. So I personally think it is going to be nuanced, and we may not be able to set broad percentages across everything, but we would want certainly to be thinking about that as a community with the time and space to actually get a fully loaded cost picture together and answer these sort of nuanced questions about access and stuff like that. It does feel to me like the type of activity that's going to take more time. So in that vein, I am supportive, especially with the timelines that Liam and Superintendent have laid out, of making a sort of reasonable, expedient decision now. I'm certain that even without all those numbers, there's been a lot of these conversations in previous school committees to support, you know, a reasonable balance. And I think I'm glad we're thinking about enumerating it a bit more in time.
So this committee is not alone in disliking strongly fees. It's kind of a through line through my time here. I'm sure the mayor's time here as well, when he was a member of the school committee previously. I think there is nothing egregious in terms of the proposals and the recommendations you've put forward. They are not we don't like fees.
Yes.
But these are reasonable fees, they are proportionate fees, and they do make sense in terms of keeping pace with rising costs, or at least attempting to across the board. I think I'm going to join with Jason and agree that there is much expediency, as the superintendent has spoken about, and that we should move forward these particular fees as recommended, while also looking to put in place some, safeguards, guidelines for future fee increases. I think someone had mentioned that there might be or is a finance subcommittee that's being devised. And if so, I'd like to propose that there's keeping the aims of the USB revenue, Liam, that you discussed, that keeping that as a source for covering the overtime funding, but also thinking about how to get additional sums of monies to cover maintenance. I think that's important. And I just did a small search across the landscape at some of our neighboring school districts, and Lexington has a really interesting proviso in their policy that I wanted to share. And they include that the hourly rate for custodial services will be adjusted annually to coincide with the salary agreement between the Lexington Public Schools and their union. I think that's an interesting way for us to build in to our youth school building agreements and our custodial fees, something that keeps pace with our rising costs. This is not something that's going to just be a static cost looking forward, plotted over time. It's going to rise, and it's going to rise at a predictable rate. We should adjust for that. So that being said, thank you for the work you've done. I know nothing further on these particular fee recommendations.
Thank you. Else, Victor, and then Ben.
Thank you very much, Liam. Great work as always.
Okay.
And I should have noticed it before, so forgive me for not paying attention to this. I noticed there was a Newton South parking one. Is there a corresponding one for Newton North?
Parking.
So this is a little bit, well,
I should have known that.
Simple
Just there, just a few days ago.
there's technically a small fee, and this is a little, so the nuance here is that Newton South, we provide on property parking. There's actually street parking at Newton North, and the students actually do pay a small fee, and I believe the fee goes to the police department. So we don't set that rate, and it is actually, it is a little bit of a bone of contention. I think for some folks, it's street parking, and we have on-site parking, so we're able to control that fee.
Got it.
And again, historically, we've just set that fee to be the same fee as the bus pass, right or wrong. So that fee, it's paid by semester. So basically, if the bus fee's gone up, we've basically made that parking fee. There's been discussions in the past. Well, maybe we want to disincentivize, not have kids drive, things like that. And then you'll get into stories of you've got students that are coming from the Williams district coming this far, so you don't want to do that. So that's been some of the history of that. But yes, there is a small fee that goes for the street parking at North, but no on-site parking for those students.
Appreciate you educating me on that one.
Yeah.
This is more of I think a broader comment for our group. It's interesting. I think Alicia, the mayor, were at this actually your wonderful hearing session, and the conversation came up about the parking situation by South. What I'm wrestling with to some extent is, let me start with a question, I guess. Are there any exceptions to the fees for a quote unquote documented need? Like, so for example, normally I would perceive, and maybe I'm wrong here, the parking as sort of a discretionary item that if you have the means and the wherewithal to do it, great. If you don't, then old-fashioned walking, bikes, and or school bus, right? But there's a part of me that's trying to think through, if you were to raise the fees, and not crazily high, but a bit stronger to sort of disincentivize those who are at the margin, do we increase our ability to collect on some of those fees while also abating some of this parking issue that comes up? My fear to some extent is what's going to happen is you're just going to end up having people that say, I don't want to pay that amount of money, and they're just going to perpetuate the problem in the neighborhoods where they end up parking there anyway, and we have empty, spots in the parking lot. So it's kind of a tricky one. I just don't know if folks have other thoughts on this. Like, my inclination is almost to say, hey, I think it was like a 3.6% increase, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 3.6. So like, maybe you can, maybe the tolerance is actually a little bit higher still to go a little bit higher and start the message of, we want to make sure that people who need to park can park, but at the same time, start to send the message that if you really don't need a park, then
Bus.
take the bus.
Yeah. Ben, before you, is that okay? Or did you want to answer that from the city side?
No, let Ben go first.
Go ahead, Ben.
Okay. Thank you, Liam. Appreciate your help with the emails last week. The proposed NECP fee increase is 6.7%. The Newton South High School preschool increase is 3%. Does that have to do with differences in the cost bases that are moving at the different sites?
Yeah, I would say so. So these are really different programs. So NECP is our self-contained program, integrated preschool program. It's just
Integrated Special Education Services.
yes. It's almost a $7 million line item, $7 million building that we've got in our budget. This is really meant to offset salaries that we've got for folks that pay into the preschool program. The Newton South program is about 5 or 6 staff members that are 100% funded by the fees that they collect from families. So they, they're part of Newton South. There are some students at Newton South that take some credited courses as well from that and actually go into those programs. So it's a service for some students, but obviously a benefit for families in that area to attend. So they're different programs. NECP, that offset is a real benefit from my perspective in terms of it's offsetting the direct program costs, while the other one, again, is just 100% covering. And in fact, Kevin Linane, the director of Newton South, has been building up a program. He, in fact, would like to invest some of his money eventually. It's really district money into a playground at that site. So he's built up a nice program there. Families come, drop their students off, but it's really a very different program than I would say.
It's part of our career technical education for those students obtaining the early childhood designation. So it's a class, and those students are general education students only.
I guess the question is the offset aiming at some percent coverage at
Right.
ICP? Are you saying we're trying to get to X percent?
Yeah. Again, the fee that we generate from NECP, we're generating more and more money. It's still, I think we're upwards of $840,000 on $7 million. So it's still just a piece. So again, we haven't used this metric. The metric that I'm kind of aware of basically steps, lane, COLA, building utilities, transportation. So they have minivans that are showing up at that. So we've got expenses growing at as you're going to see, high rates right now for this year.
Right.
So these expenses are growing 5-6% in many cases. And so trying to keep pace with that type of
So
cost.
those are the places where the system's expenses are growing faster. So the expenses in NECP are outpacing the expenses of the rest of the system, which is why we wind up with a higher. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Well, and I don't think there were regular revisions to the fee schedule for some years. So
Yeah, I saw the history on that. Okay. All right. The high school activities fee, from the comparison chart, it looks like a few towns have $50 or $100. No one has more than that, and a lot of towns have zero. My question is, what could we do if we had fee revenue that we're not going to be able to do without it? So maybe an example of a club or something. I don't know. We went from 150 to 0. I think I could support some number in between, like 50 or 100, like these other towns have, if I understood what we get from it.
That's a great question. So, I mean, again, I think the goal from my perspective was not so much addition. It was more trying to subtract costs that we've got. So I like your question. This one, I think that we wanted to look at this as a new path. When speaking to the high school principals, I think they had concerns about, and I think the mayor brought this up about potentially losing some students that may go into this and looking at different programs. Some may just, dip into different pieces. We saw this as a chance to do unlimited activities. I can't tell you that we fully flushed out that we're going to do brand new things. We have a lot of offerings. I think our high schools, it's pretty amazing the amount of offerings that they'll try to offer, put out there for students. There's offerings that are during kind of some of the wind blocks, but then there's offerings after school. There's certainly a lot of the, the band and music and then certainly athletics, but then there's a lot of different clubs as well. So I can't specifically tell you that we were planning to add additional things to this. This again, we're paying out lots of stipends for these pieces. And the goal was to basically try and see how could I reduce those stipends. Again, my goal is typically to try to find revenue to reduce those costs. I'm sure the high school principals, if asked, and we did not ask them in terms of what would you add, I think that they could come up with plenty of ideas. So if that's something you wanted to do. So my general sense, just given our time, it was Amy Winston, who's really involved with Newton North. She said that this is quite complicated. I think we'd need to talk about a lot of things. They've got various pieces going on, and I think she would feel this would be rushed on her side. They've got various components during the day. What's a fee and what's not a fee? So my sense is for us to go back and just talk to them and see what we could do and how this would help their programming.
Okay, that makes sense. A lot of respect for Amy.
Yeah,
that's what we're hearing. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I will say, I think that we should think about in the summer conversation, doing a step up where we might start at 25 one year and then go to 50 and then build our way. If we're telling the students you're getting the same program and now it costs 150 for nothing more, that's not great. If we're saying, hey, you've been getting it for free and we're paying a stipend to this person and we're going to start trying to pay some of that off, again, I think it aligns with Tamika's point. These should be regular and predictable increases, not chunk increases. I'm good. Thank you.
I do just want everyone to know that this would just make it parallel with the middle school activity fee now. So that, I believe that is why that number was chosen.
Laredo and Victor.
So, I'm always reluctant about fees because with the exception of the fully funding preschool, which is different, and the rentals of school buildings, we are essentially charging families and students for engaging in activities that we want them to engage in. That's really the tension I always have seen with fees. So with school buildings, for example, and by the way, I want to be really clear. I'm going to vote for this. I think we've got to get this moving forward. The superintendent's 100% right. We've got to make decisions. We can't just push decisions off and off and off. And she needs that both so she can set fees for next year and also for her budgeting. So I think we just got to do that. But it seems to me that we, when it comes to use of school buildings, really need to think again much more carefully about what we're charging outside groups versus say the after-school programs. I think after-school programs fall in a completely different category. I frankly view them in many ways as a substitute for the fact that we don't have a longer school day. And that is really my view of that, because our school day, by definition, elementary school is frankly truncated compared to what other countries do. So I think we need to be exploring that much more. And I also want to see us think about not just kind of covering, the custodial type costs, but really going above and beyond that, because it's not just custodial costs.
Yeah.
That's piece number one. And I see that some of the schools have, multi-year deals. I think I understand the rationale for that, and they need some level of continuity. But I would urge us, for anybody who's a third party, not an after-school type program, I just think we have to look at it much more carefully going forward. What I'd also suggest is that we think conceptually about what percentage we want fees to cover our programs in general, and then use that as a baseline for setting fees so it's not more arbitrary. So for example, if we say that we want fees to cover 20% of our programming, and it could be 25%, it could be 15%, it could be 30%, it really doesn't matter, that we apply that analysis in coming up with an athletic fee, a student or club fee, a theater fee, whatever fee we're going to charge. I think that would feel fairer across the board. That's going to take obviously some work. You're not going to get to it now. I appreciate on the parking fee the idea of recognizing that some kids do need to use their cars to get to perhaps a job after school. My concern there is creating levels of complexity for these types of things that I really think we should avoid if at all possible. So I would not favor that for that reason, not because I'm not sympathetic, but I just think we have to make this as simple as possible for our administrators frankly, the less we spend in administrative overhead, the more money we're actually generating to cover costs. And so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Linda first and then back to the side.
I guess I would like to say that much as Mayor Mark and Tamika said, that with great, I'm okay with the proposed fees, but I would like to say on the record with great hesitation. I am particularly troubled by those high school sports fees at $480 per sport. I believe that was putting us at the single highest number of all the peer scores. Belmont maybe was a tier higher, but then if you played two sports, it went down per sport. And it's, I hate to say it, it's not something I'm proud of to be the highest there. And I do believe it will impact what I would call fringe athletes, probably the students that would benefit most from participating. So in the spirit of, I guess, getting this done, I would be okay, but with significant hesitation. And what I would like to pose, and I actually don't know the process for doing so, is how do we enable it so that next year we're not in the same boat and we've got 2 meetings and we got to quickly get this done? Because I do believe there's some creativity. For example, bus transportation. Like, I have no idea, you probably know, Liam, but you know, how much are our high school buses being used? Could we do away with something like high school buses? That sounds like a horrible idea, but should we study that? And, or could we get sponsorships for EV bus transportation and could that lower our costs? That would take a lot of work and effort to execute, but could we somehow build this into the time? Because in the future year, because I am really concerned that our fees are going to impact those fringe athletes at the high school level.
But just a couple of quick comments. One, from my perspective, I think ideally if we could
Liam,
get.
I'm just going to stop
Oh, yeah,
you
go ahead.
because we're going to have a summer group. We
Yeah.
already said that. We're going to take care of that. And I would just encourage the committee. Our team took a long time today to answer all your questions, particularly like about EV busing and why we can't actually go out to bid for EV buses until our bus contract expires. So it's all detailed in there, just for the sake of how long a night we have. And we definitely, I've written down every piece of feedback that you have given. That will become our summer marching orders for how we will roll on the research so that you're comfortable and you're not squished into a 2-day time period.
Victor, did you have one more?
I did, recognizing the superintendent's desire to move quickly forward. So one, I also think that our finance committee is also well suited to, along with the summer meeting, to have these conversations. So my sense, Linda, is we're articulating the perspective. I trust our finance committee to come back with their guidance over the next 8 months or so. The one thing I should have addressed was the language schools, particularly, you know, the Newton Chinese Language School, the Cantonese School, the Korean School. One quick question and one quick comment. The 5-year schedule, is this, forgive my lack of understanding, Liam, this is fixed and understood with them already? And if so, when is our next expected time to revisit those fees?
So this was actually passed last year, and David Stickney's in regular contact with those, with their contacts there, and has given them the schedule. In addition to these fees, there's actually custodial overtime charges as well. So I believe they've got an understanding of that. So we looked at these rates. There was a kind of a request to kind of make sure we standardize the rates across them. So you know, from my perspective, these rates, this was a 5-year plan to phase these increases going forward. So it's kind of an already automatically set going forward. Again, the school committee, if you'd like to make a recommendation to change it, we can do that. I didn't make that recommendation here. If that's something you want to do, but this was something that was kind of a planned. It's going back to 2017, then COVID hit. It was kind of a plan to kind of phase them in over time.
Got it. No, I think it's great. I have heard no complaints. I think it's a great great approach. My only last comment, I guess, is I tend to agree with the mayor actually that when it comes to external parties, that might be where there's more lift, if you would, or more expectation. My only caution thinking about these language schools is if there are others, this is just food for thought for the finance committee or the summer meeting. If there are entities that are third parties but have direct instruction as part of their core goal, maybe those are treated a little bit differently from others who are doing rentals. Food for thought.
Thank you. Tamika?
I applaud raise up the points Linda made. They were excellently made. And really, we've had such a good discussion around this. I look forward to the creativity and the planning that's going to happen this summer. It's going to be helpful on many scopes. And with that, I move approval of the recommended fees put forward in the memo by Liam and your team. Thank you, Amy, as well.
Just for clarification, sorry.
Do we have I think we need to, if there's a second, and then we can discuss.
I will second that motion.
Discussion.
Just want to clarify with the motion. Is the motion specifically for this fees document and the music program as well too, or are you doing this all one package, or is this just for this fee?
I was doing all one package. Do I need to separate it out?
There's the fees, the preschool, and the music lesson. So
That's
there's three memos, so I assumed it was all three.
The recommendation, yep. Recommended fees. How about that?
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Good point, though.
Because my question on that front was going to be, so I'm fine. I tend to agree, by the way, that we should do this as proposed, and with the music fees as well too. The only question I'm figuring out is whether we want to put to Jonathan's point I guess up here 10% flux adjustment in case there's demand for that music program specifically.
Are you raising your hand, Jonathan?
I think we agreed to table my suggestion until the summer and keep moving. So I'm supportive of, I'm okay. Completely inappropriate, I think, in this context of how Robert's Rules works, but I'm okay.
You're in order. So again, the motion is to approve all three fee memos, including the music program and the BCP and the buildings, and the BCP. Okay. We have our second. Ben, you have a question?
We talked our first day about conflict of interest and the need to announce when fees impacted us. What is our obligation around that?
I think in this case, it's part of school, right? In the same way that if you changed part of a curriculum and your kid was in that class, it's a necessary part of just Jason Heller.
If I'm remembering with absolutely zero experience, it's if there's a predominating amount of the community that's also affected, then there's not a disclosure required.
Okay.
Good ethics, though. Good job.
Right.
I'll second.
We have a second.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
So
Yeah.
if there's no more discussion, we are ready to vote. We'll vote it. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7 is a yes. Ward 8?
Yes.
Laredo?
Yes.
Great. Motion to approve fees passes 9-0.
You.
Well, thank you, Liam. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Go home now?
Now we're ready for
us.
I just want to thank the public for allowing us to do that first so that we can get our preschool families off and running and not run out of time this evening. Committee, Alicia and I consulted a little earlier today, and if there's something that has to be tabled because we have so many questions, the pilot portion of the slide deck that you have, you will actually receive an in-depth report and presentation when the selected curriculum comes before you, because one of your purviews is to adopt curriculum that is substantially different from what is currently occurring in the district. That's in our school committee policy handbook. So we will bring that to you in May after the decision is imminent and the discussions are happening with our staff now. So if there's something to not focus on deeply, that would be the thing for this evening, because it will come before you with a vote eventually attached to it. I do want to just frame the work and invite my colleagues, Dr. Gina Flanagan and Ms. Jennifer Shore. Jen is our K-12 math director and Gina is our teaching and learning superintendent, who have been my partners in this work. Just wanted, you know, as new committee members, you're often asking, what is the point of what we're doing in this moment? And so I just want to make sure that you know, one, you will be given a recommendation from the math curriculum teaching pilot group for a curriculum to adopt in math for elementary, middle, and high school in May. And so this is to understand what all the processes and how that pilot decision fits into a larger math program update. You had asked as a committee for an update because, like me, you receive a lot of conversation about math, and a lot of people hit you up on the election trail about this, and I need you to know where we are. And I think we can't talk about it enough in terms of what I've heard from Newton residents. So just to frame the evening a little bit, in terms of requests for change from parents and students, and in varied ways, even our staff, this presentation begins the implementation phase of a complete program change and curriculum revision and adoption, which hasn't happened in a long time in mathematics in the district. I will also say that you evaluate the high school course catalogs and approve their handbooks each fall. So next year, middle school changes will occur, and thereafter that will impact what the program course of studies looks like, and you need to be up to speed on what the impacts are and what the changes are so that you can vote next fall in 26, 27 about that. So that's your oversight duty that will help you with that. Next, you heard me say last week at our meeting, one of my personal goals, my student learning goal, was the math program revision and adoption. So this is also germane to how you have to evaluate your only employee later. And finally, it's just important that we allow this presentation to be explained in full because it's one of the most important decisions we're making around the academic program in some time. And we need to educate the community about what all the changes are going to be. So it's as much for our families as it is for you as a decision-making board. And I'll just say, the fifth thing I want to tell you is that I feel deep urgency to make these programmatic shifts. It has taken 2.5 years, but I can sit here today and give you, even the truck is excited, give you the winter district benchmarking for math. This is our 3rd year of that data and the performance of students. And it just underscores the urgency. And I made you a nice little handout. It's colored. If you want to follow along with this in the public, it's been added to our public materials. I just want to focus on middle school, that student performance and MTSS support in middle schools. The reason for our urgency, part 1, the percentage of students exceeding expectations category for the state standards for our grade in mathematics district-wide. 73% of students are meeting and or well above grade level in our current testing environment. And 56% of those students district-wide are in the exceeding category, meaning more than 1 grade level above their current grade level. When you break that down into middle school, grades 6 to 8 only, 42% of our students are in the exceeding expectations category compared to the state standards for their grade. And I just want to be clear, our teachers are delivering curriculum, and many of them are experienced and very expert at doing this. And parents are supplementing to provide rigor and acceleration experiences for their children when their students' passion and talents justify it. So 2 things are true. This is very different from our literacy story, by the way, which does not have this kind of exceeding benchmarks scenario. I want to say our urgency number 2 is that on average, our average growth percentiles for students over the last 2 years in Newton shows a decline of average student growth percentile. The stagnation and the decrease in growth percentile show that Newton is not keeping pace with the nation as a whole and how student growth percentiles are calculated. So for those above benchmark, our advanced learners, they're growing less than anywhere across the nation in terms of the national benchmark, and certainly in terms of the state benchmarking. Now, I'll be coming to you in a future meeting with more statistics like this so you can get a more broad view of what's happening. But it just underscores that for our advanced learners aren't growing as much, and for our students below benchmark, they are also not growing as much. So 863 students across grades 6 through 9. There are 690 students in grades 6 to 8, and their average growth score in math is 39%. That is considered low growth, below the average growth, which is 40 to 60% across the country. So in our middle schools, we do not have the math MTSS structures in place, the support, enrichment, and interventions to both extend our advanced learners or to address the needs that you just heard about for our struggling learners. So what that means is that the classroom teachers can't pull a new rabbit out of the same hat without additional resources. It's not due to the practice of our classroom math educators, but it is a combination of our curriculum, lack of alignment, teacher training and differentiation, and these opportunities for intervention and enrichment. Our fully subscribed teachers who teach full-time at the middle school already cannot add additional intervention blocks without extending their school day. I don't think stuck and stagnant is how we want our math program to be remembered. And so this then puts pressure on the high schools to do the catch-up and the advanced and inspiring work of passionate math educators, because the parents are demanding it and students are desiring it. And so we hope that this program phases in the coming years. We will continue to hear, if we don't phase in this program, we're going to continue to hear of family dissatisfaction, which I know I never go a day without hearing at least 1 or 2 stories from families about this topic. It's often cited as the reason that people use private tutors and cottage programs and choose private school to make up the deficit that they perceive us to have in our math program. So it's with that I am very proud of both our teacher team of math educators. A special shout out to Jen Letourneau and Alex Kraus, the department heads at both North and South High School, who work with Jen in order to bring you the changes that we're talking about today. So,
okay, thank
take it
you.
away.
All right, thank you, everybody. First of all, on behalf of the Office of the Teaching and Learning, I want to welcome all our new school committee members and say hello to the ones that were here last year. We hope that our team, as we build this relationship together, will serve as a trusted resource as you engage with the district work as it relates to curriculum instruction and assessment. As Anna had alluded to, the presentation tonight really reflects more than 1.5 years of collaborations with educators, with students, with families, and with leaders across the district. While we've established a very strong blueprint tonight for the future of mathematics in Newton Public Schools, I do want to emphasize that it's important to note that the work is still ongoing, and many of the details will continue to be refined throughout thoughtful implementation, ongoing feedback, and careful monitoring in the years ahead. I'd also like to extend my sincere gratitude to our 2 department chairs, Jen Letourneau and Alex Kraus, for their leadership in bringing the 2 high schools together in this work of alignment. For our presentation tonight, we have some updates that we'd like to share with you. We're going to focus on the math pathways and share a little bit about how the implementation and structure of that is going. We also want to share with you some of the work that we're doing in the creation of an accelerated high school Math 1, algebra, geometry, and statistics course for next year. We will also, if time permits, give you some information about the pilots. We'll talk a little bit about the integrated math, Algebra 1 geometry, and Algebra 2 debate that has been happening at the high school. And we'll also talk about the high school placement tests that we are going to be initiating next year for our 8th grade students who would be moving into integrated Math 2 honors. I also want to state that throughout this process, and we will continue to uphold these values, is that this process has been very collaborative. So we've made sure to include multiple voices as we develop every part of this particular process. It's very data-driven, and we make sure that the decisions that we've had are based on evidence, and that we're always focused on our students, making sure that all students get what they need when they need it. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the math pathways, the frameworks, what it looks like in terms of the actual journey of our high school and middle school students, and talk a little bit about the implementation. We always said that math is a very powerful tool. And while Newton Public Schools has always had high quality math instruction throughout the district, we also have to recognize that the changing landscape of the world is changing the way that we deal with mathematics. And so we recognize that our programs are in need of adjustments and review. And with that, we started to outline some key components of the pathways that I think are important to share with you as we kind of go through tonight's presentation. One thing that we kind of have been like discussing over and over again is that we need to move away from rigid tracking and really open up the doors for our students in terms of how they receive math instruction. The goal has always been to move away from gatekeeping and to create gateways for kids to advance math coursework. We believe that the math doors should be open and not closed on our students. We also recognize that our students have need different supports at different times. They have very unique needs, and that's also a key tenet of the math pathways. At the center of the math pathways, and I want to emphasize this as many chances as I can, is our students. The math pathways was designed to make sure that our students who struggle or are challenged get the most support that they can, whether that's catch-up growth, and we've talked a little bit about what that might look like in the future with the hiring of potentially math specialists at the middle school, as well as summer bridge programs throughout the summer. We've also recognized that there are many students, as Anna just illustrated with us with the data, that are in need of more challenge. And we have been trying to develop ways in which that acceleration is feasible within our structures. We also have been working really hard to make sure that these pathways are very flexible and equitable in terms of how students graduate to advanced math courses. And finally, we're very focused on the life preparation piece of this. As I mentioned in an earlier presentation, many employees are demanding much more complex math skills. And so as a community, we want to make sure that our kids are ready to face those challenges. As part of our overall discussions and the work that we've been doing, we've been taking a look at our current structures and comparing what they would look like in the future. And so one of the things we've talked a lot about is rigor throughout the district. Right now, the High School Curriculum Council is heavily engaged in conversations in terms of what does rigor actually mean? And one of the things that's come out of that process is that the definition of rigor throughout our district has been very inconsistent. For some teachers, it's defined by pace. Sometimes it's defined by the volume of work, when really, when we talk about rigor, there are many complex frameworks out there that define it by depth and complexity. And that's what we're really after, is making sure that our definition of rigor is aligned and meets those frameworks. Right now, our CP only courses, unfortunately, are disproportionately enrolled with students who are on IEPs, students of color, and our ELL students. And our hope is that with the structure of the new pathways, the support needed to give those students the opportunity to advance in their math journey is embedded in some of these grade level courses. We've also talked a lot about curriculum alignment throughout the district, as I'm sure you've heard many times, is that, we don't have a lot of common curriculum expectations, and that creates all kinds of problems for our students and for our teachers. So we're working towards creating those processes and those structures in place to make sure that all grade levels are firmly defined. And lastly, we've heard a lot from our teachers about their feelings about multi-level classes and that it requires much more planning and collaboration. And so our belief is that with the transition to the new pathways with fewer levels, it will hopefully improve the coherence and teacher collaboration. And finally, we also have recognized that differentiation throughout the district has been very inconsistent, and a very good, well-developed curriculum builds in those differentiation processes into the curriculum itself so that teachers can work on the things that, like developing relationships with students and their lesson planning and so forth. So we want to make sure that the differentiation is very clear, concise, and is aligned throughout the district. So this next slide kind of shows you what our new standard for math for our middle school students. The new standard is that we are really working to raise the bar for our students. And in order to do that, we are proposing that we move toward high school math 1, algebra, geometry, and statistics for all 8th grade students. Now, this is an accelerated pathway. As you are probably familiar with DESE standards and DESE pathways, typically that is done at, algebra 1 is taught at the 9th grade level. But based on our data and based on what we know our students can do, we want to raise that bar a little bit more. And the reason is because we want the rigor to be accessible to all of our students. In order to do this work, it's imperative that we work on a couple key components. We talked a lot about the alignment of curriculum, and with that comes the alignment of common assessments. We have to use that data to help design our intervention plan for our students. So when we do hire those math specialists, they'll have a good profile of our students' needs and be able to target the work that they need to do to get the students to be where they can flourish. And then we've talked a lot about these summer bridge programs as another component of making this all kind of work out. And then the idea of enrichment. As we said earlier, we know that we have a lot of kids who are ready to take on more math, and the data then the curriculum that we have proposed is going to help kind of make that happen sooner than later. So this slide is a little bit complicated, but I really do want to spend some time explaining it to you.
So this is me.
What's that?
This
Yeah.
one's me. I just want to first start, like we realized that when Gina had said in one of the slides, fewer levels means less scatter among, or I don't know, how did you just phrase it? Fewer levels. What was your phrase?
Complex coherence and
Right,
the
coherence
cohesion
for
piece.
fewer levels. But a lot of people heard that in the community as meaning something else. So I just want to explain what that means. So prior placement process into levels generations ago was called tracking. And I just want people to understand that that was like you got placed in a level and it was your life sentence and you traveled in that level and maybe you saw all your courses in that level. Sometimes you would get some variance in level math or ELA, but that's called tracking. Other times in the district, we've had placement processes, and you hear a lot about this from parents like pre-COVID and post-COVID, that kids were grouped according to like teacher recommendations and perhaps MCAS scores, things like that, which had sort of less data than we're proposing now to use to place students into pathways. And there was some subjective processes with teacher recommendations and an override parent process that also impacted who was placed into what level across the system. These levels were called things like advanced college prep, accelerated, advanced, and honors. And I just need everyone to know that those meant different things within schools by department, and our two high schools mean different things sometimes when they talk about that. So I just want to say that we would all be well served by taking all the memories that we have and sticking them over here right now. So just wipe your brain of that situation, just set it aside, because the district is now designing rigorous courses that cover expected standards and give a chance for both accelerated experiences and remediation as necessary. And I just want to do a little finger math with you now. And it's all kosher, trust me. So one, in previous times in grade 8 and grade 9, there was one course offered. And so when students matriculated up into the 9th grade, that one course was then divided into these labels, ACP, CP, honors, depending on which school, at which time, and in which land we were in, it meant different things and there were different labels. We also have some programs that are outside of any levels, programs like Da Vinci and Global and New Media Studies at South. That's a long-standing tradition of interdisciplinary courses where parents know that they are choosing a non-leveled experience. Those courses are just, and those types of teams and programs are going to stay where they are in South, and they're going to live on their own, and everybody knows the rules of engagement when they go into those classes. But now I'm saying to you that we turn from one course with many levels, different at North, different at South, in mathematics to 5 different courses. So if you walk back 1 year with me to 8th grade, everyone gets accelerated into algebra. That is, changes what everyone in this district gets ahead by 1 year from what we are today. So that's the first part. Second, when we have students in algebra in 8th grade, there will be an accelerated pathway and a standard pathway for the grade level in 8th grade. We've also developed an assessment that will allow truly advanced students at the end of 8th grade to take a test to see if they can opt out of 9th grade material altogether. So those are things that have existed in our timeframe. They exist in other districts, and we've created a process for that. So right there, there's 3 courses that we are talking about that matriculate to 9th grade. We also know, one of my children is a perfect example of this, that some kids take that algebra class in grade 8 and it doesn't go so well because there is a range of developmental readiness. So we need to offer it again in 9th grade. So there's 4 levels or classes, if you will. And then there are students who need specially designed instruction that are not yet at the level of being able to access algebra with fluency. And so that is a foundations course. So instead of hyper-focusing on and labeling children about who they are. We are saying, you know, are you an honors kid? Are you an ACP kid? We are going to place you in the level that you're ready to access when you are ready to access it. And there will be waypoints throughout time, within years and between years, where students will have that capacity to go into courses that they're ready for. If you look at this visual here, green is what the grade level standards are dictated in terms of state standards. And you will see in the blue boxes in our core academic, you know, foundational courses for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, that we are offering several accelerated options now for students within the Newton Public Schools. Lots of questions from all of you in the public. Are there going to be, you know, honors trajectories that continue those kids who may have matriculated early into integrated math 2 and 3? Answer is yes. I also need everyone to give us a little patience and time, because we have not yet assessed those rising 8th graders to know how many children we're talking about, how many courses, and what the pathways of the future are, down to the number of children, the number of teachers, and the number of sections. So we are going to have to learn a little bit this spring when we assess our students before I can answer every single question that you put forward to me here. And I will honor the fact that you have those questions, and we will absolutely come back and roll it out. I also need to give our teachers the time to digest what are the courses going to look like with the new curriculum-based resources that we are about to adopt. So in teachers' minds, things are pegged by honors, ACP, CP, and you just heard Gina say that means different things to folks in terms of rigor level. So one of the reasons to have a base curriculum resource is to help with differentiation across any course, because even in the most advanced course, there is going to be variance between young people, and we owe it in every course. We owe it to those children to be able to differentiate instruction, but not to the level that we have experienced in what has been known as the multi-level classes in our system right now. That is a task too big for any teacher. And with the post-COVID gaps, it was double so. So moving from one course with lots of levels mixed among them to 5 courses with much more rigorous defined benchmarks for each course, that is where we sit as we start to assess students this spring in grade 8. So I've said a lot. We'll revisit this as much as you need to, but there is no one pathway that a student can be in. I'll use my own 2 children as an example. Again, one child accelerated math started in grade 7, Westboro Public Schools. By grade 8, they told him, no, you're not ready to continue this path. By grade 9, he was back in the accelerated path, and he's a pharmacist right now, doing just fine, having done all the math courses. My other child had to repeat Algebra 1 twice, and she still got to pre-calculus, and she's a business major. She's making that. So I have like a living experiment in my house, but we want students to be able to have those options. My youngest used summer programming to jump up in order to get to pre-calculus when she needed to get it. So I'm saying this to you, the decision makers, because we cannot do this program if we do not have the support resources for summer and intervention to really mean it when we say that any child can move a level when they're ready. And if they aspire to move, we should be able to help them with that process. Otherwise, we create an equity issue that is worse than what we are doing now. So that is the span of this. So many of you asked me, so what will a kid move to if they're in X course? Will they move to X course? I don't know. It depends how they do in the first course. And if they still, need additional challenge, maybe they'll go up to a different course that's more challenging, or maybe they will be skipping some content. But we don't know that yet until we have our assessments defined based on our curriculum resources that we're purchasing, which we don't have in a unified fashion in the system right now at all. So I'm going to let you take it from here about what does that actually mean in terms of implementation.
All right, great. So over the next 3 slides, we've kind of outlined what the implementation will look like, and we've developed like three different phases for it. And we've defined it by the student experience and staff and district work. Right now, we're hyper-focused on, as we mentioned earlier, the 7th graders taking the Accelerated High School Math 1 assessment, algebra, geometry, and statistics, and we'll talk a little bit about that assessment in just a few minutes. And we're also working very closely with the high school department chairs to develop the integrated Math 2 honors. We also are working to create those summer programs that we discussed earlier, in which students who are currently below grade level in 6th, 7th, and 8th get those supports. The next couple years are pretty much a continuation of that development and implementation. It will also include conversations with what to do in terms of our win blocks throughout the district, and also the professional learning that our teachers will get. So I won't go into every single bullet, but you have the slides and you can kind of see where our work is going through implementation, alignment, and monitoring. That's really the focus.
And I think it's important, just we've been down a couple roads where we've stumbled on some miscommunications. This is a teacher phase in and a student phase in, and that it is our intention to give teachers time, professional development, and collaboration time across schools and levels before they have to implement the curriculum. So there's this sort of perception that, you know, right away, everything K-12 is going to change. And we've heard parents, I know that urgency is there, but we cannot break our teachers in that process. And they need to be able to express their expertise in the time they need to do it. And we are pushing to make the system that we think is best serving the kids.
So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jen Shore, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Accelerated High School Math 1 assessment, algebra, geometry, and statistics. Quite the mouthful.
Got to come up with a nickname. So you've heard already the talk that in 8th grade, we're going to have 2 different pathways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the placement process. We're really focusing on readiness over speed as we prioritize acceleration for all students. That's really been the mantra. Readiness over speed, we want kids to demonstrate that they are prepared for Algebra 1 concepts in Math 1 integrated. It can't be based on a single data point. We've got to have multiple data points to make these decisions for students. We need rigorous options where both the standards and the accelerated pathways teach grade level standards. We're not creating dumbed down versions for students. It's all going to be based on grade level standards. And then, as mentioned before, the pathways need to be flexible. These are not tracks the way we think of them historically. These are options for students to be in a class, and if they need to change, we need to monitor that, and there need to be on-ramps and off-ramps for students at all times. So this is our attempt at a visual. This might be our 3rd or 4th attempt. It used to be round, it used to be triangular. It's not easy to demonstrate as what we're trying to do here because we have to transition. Like Dr. Nolan said, we can't snap our fingers and say everyone jump into the next level, not having had the prior standards. So the highlighted column, the second column there, 26, 27 is next year. We're phasing in high school math 1 for that second from the bottom row. It'll be part grade 8, part high school math 1 standards because that cohort of students will not have had all of the 7th grade standards and some of the 8th the way they will once we get to the compacted. But we are putting a full high school math 1 accelerated class in for students who demonstrate readiness. The next year, 27, 28, you can see that yellow is increasing as we increase the high school math 1 standards because that cohort will have gotten some of 8th the previous year. And then by fall of 28, we're all in. So it's a little tricky to interpret, but we really wanted to show the transition. We cannot ask students who haven't seen any 7th grade standards to jump into high school 1. So that's really, I think this one is sticking. It seems to be working. But that's what that's trying to demonstrate. Is
And the beautiful part is that those kids who are ready for the algebra standards are getting them. So that it's not, we phase it for everyone. If you're ready, you're ready, and you get what you need when you need it.
So again, we talked about this. There's going to be 2 pathways, but they're based on, well, in fall 2028, they'll be fully based on high school math 1 standards. They're both teaching the same content. One will be more, kids will have more time to build the concepts, and they can focus on the reinforcement, review, and practice with more time. And then the high school math accelerated is going to move at a faster pace. It'll have more application, and it requires a higher level of readiness and problem solving. It'll be more complex problems. So that they're both the same standards, grade level standards, but one is more complex than the other. Is this you?
Yep. So this isn't my first rodeo of creating an auto enrollment course of assessments, which means, which is a standards, a research-backed method for how you place students in a mathematics pathway program. And so the important part for families and kids to know is that we're looking at you as a student in all the ways you're a student. There's not one high stakes test. There's not one snapshot in time. There will be an algebra readiness assessment this spring, but we're also looking at all the assessments that you've done all the time that you're in middle school and trying to ensure that we have a balanced student profile for you. And as a longtime middle school educator, I can just say to you that second only to infancy, the brain changes the most in middle school. So we know that, you know, just because a student looks one way in sixth grade doesn't mean they're going to be the same way we expected in eighth grade. And this pathway program allows for that flexibility. This is you guys.
Okay, great. Perfect. So to place students, we've created this metric. The algebra readiness assessment will be given at the end of April. Students who scored 90%, this is our primary metric, is the algebra readiness. Students who score 90% or greater will automatically be enrolled in that high school Math 1 accelerated. Students who score between 80 and 89%, we will then look at secondary data, which is the collection of common assessment data, Amplified Desmos, and also the STAR assessment. And we'll look at the domain mastery. So there's a very specific report that we'll consider. Both will need to be 90% or greater for the student to be placed in Math 1 accelerated. And if the student is not 90% or greater, they'll be placed in high school Math 1. So this is high school Math 1 starting in fall 2028. For the next 2 years, it'll be that half red, half yellow Math 8 as we beef up the standards. This is the timeline and the criteria. April 29th is the assessment. May 1st is the makeup. We are working on the assessment now. We're building it in DNA, which is one of the Renaissance products. We're guessing about 15 questions. Some need to be open response because we're really looking for depth of understanding, and that will require grading and scoring. So it does make it a little more complex. The questions that are multiple choice will be automatically scored. We're going to measure conceptual and procedural readiness for algebra, and anyone on an IEP or 504 will have accommodations. So it'll be offered to everybody.
I just want to say our partnership with Renaissance Learning, they adopted us basically for 2 years to allow us to try their products, gives us access to professional psychometricians who help us to design a test that I think everybody can be proud of. Teachers are great test designers, but we want to make sure in an environment like this, there's free of bias and that we're not like choosing Ben's test over Victor's and, you know, you liked that teacher better, that kind of thing. So we're designing it from scratch.
These are the secondary metrics I mentioned before, the Amplified Desmos, which are the unit-based assessments, and then the STAR Math. Students can opt out of the assessment, or families can opt out of the assessment if it doesn't feel right for that student. And other students, if they're within the assessment, they can also, while they're taking it, decide that they don't want to go further. So there are options for students who don't feel that this is right for them. This whole process will be completed by early June when families will be notified as to where their student will be placed.
We're currently planning a parent information session to educate parents about the process on April the 2nd.
So the first opt-out option is April 17th. It's just a Google form that families can complete, and then that student wouldn't sit for the assessment. The second one is if a student is placed and accelerated and the family decides that they prefer the standard pace, they don't want that accelerated pace, they can then decline that placement and the student will be placed in Math 8 or eventually high school Math 1. We are not offering the appeals process, kind of a standards appeal process. It's built in that those different criteria, so that if a student places between 80 and 89% on the readiness, we do have a way to look at more metrics to make the decision. We really want this to be driven by the data and not by preference or loud people. So it's very much taking this out of the hands of the teachers as well. We don't want them to have to deal with any families or situations that feel uncomfortable. So we're trying to design something that's very clean, very data-driven, and very criteria-based so that we won't have hiccups.
I just want to say too, this is our first year implementing it, and we will review after the first year to see if these metrics worked, if we need to make any adjustments. But just to start, we felt this was a good grounding basis for the assessment process.
Again, we talked about this, that these are not the tracks that I grew up with. These are flexible pathways, and we need to make sure that there are options for students, both summer programming as well as intervention. I don't think we put this in here, but the middle school teams are meeting now to talk about scheduling because the schedules need to be designed in such a way that kids do have options to move within the year. And that's different than what we've done in the past. So those conversations have started. Standard placement in 8th grade does not close doors. So standard high school math 1 as well as accelerated can lead to accelerated courses. Just because you're put in or placed in standard high school math 1 does not limit you as a high school student. And we need to make that really clear.
Particularly with the interventions and the supports that we've built into this whole process. So we just put some resources in case you want to look at this at a later date, but we have been constructing a frequently asked question sheet for parents that will go out shortly. And you can also view the opt-out form with that link that's provided for you. Pause for questions, or did we want to keep going?
If the committee agrees, we could pause here for questions before we move on to looking at the pilots or the AGA versus integrated math decision. I think those topics might separate. Start with Linda.
This was fantastic. Thank you. One question, and you may not have a full answer, but just like a sense would be helpful, is do you have any idea as to when families would be notified of a summer program that was needed? And then what would that summer program look like? This is what you may not know, but like, is it 5 days a week? Is it 2 evenings a week? Like, because, you know, summer plans are typically made early in the year, sometimes even before January 1.
So the benchmark data went out today to all families. So families can get that in Aspen right now. We have identified about 200 students across the middle schools that we think could be eligible for summer jump up programming. That would be the 3 weeks in August, just prior to school beginning. It's 3 days a week for 6 hours a day. It will include math courses, and we're still in discussion, probably a financial literacy or a STEM course. And then it's snuggled into our NCE ecosystem, so parents could attach other NCE courses to it. So the curriculum is designed based around their STAR data as it exits in June. So that data will go, and the teachers will use that data and the resources from Renaissance along with other curriculum materials to address that. Now, knowing full well that not every single family will want to participate in that. We're guessing like 100 people might sort of be interested. Newton has not had a robust summer school program in a long time. And when Jen was running it last, she'd invite like 300 people and 100 people would show up. So that's the only data that we have post-COVID.
Thank you.
You'll be notified shortly is the answer.
So let me just start off by thanking you. I think it's great that you're taking a comprehensive look at the math curriculum. I personally am very excited by what you're proposing. I very much like the idea of different ways to achieve success. I think that is going to meet both the concerns of many parents, but frankly, more importantly, the needs of our students. So I think that's really terrific. And I also think, as painful as it's going to be for some families, the idea that you use clear data to determine the suitability of a child for a certain level, but not doing it in a one-size high-stakes test is exactly the right way to go. I certainly remember days when parents would, a child would be recommended for something, the parents would do an override of that. The eighth grade, there was the rising seventh grader would be placed in eighth grade kind of accelerated track. That probably wasn't good for anybody, including the kid. But nevertheless, there was often a lot of pressure there. And I think taking the subjectivity out of it is actually really important. I also applaud the idea that we are going to be consistent across the schools, the 4 middle schools, the 2 high schools. In my mind, it's great to have electives that may differ in different schools, and you always want to encourage a teacher who's looking to try something new, but standardization for basics has to be the same regardless of what middle school or high school you go to. So my questions to you, Dr. Nolan, are really twofold. We're not the only district to do this. So can you point us to some comparable districts, either in the greater Boston area or even elsewhere in the country, that have done what you're proposing and the level of success there? That's piece number one. And piece number two, and I have to be constantly aware of the cost of things. You are proposing some additional FTEs to do this. I'd want to, before I be comfortable with that, know what the FTE levels are at those comparable systems, and not just the pure numbers, but what they're actually doing. And I just put those both out there, not to be necessarily answered now, but certainly at a later date. I think it's really important for us to be able to look at other systems, especially, and say, this has worked really well here. This is why. What did they do that we're doing? What are we doing that's different? And if so, why are we doing that differently? So with that, thank you. And again, I think this is for probably a future discussion, so no need to answer at this time.
I can say to you in Metro West, we are one of the only schools not offering 9th grade math at the middle school level. So in the 32 Metro West towns.
I have no doubt that we have fallen below what we should be doing. I'm really more interested in your idea of a pathway to success.
Yep, we can bring you that.
We need to understand who has done that, why, and especially what resources they've had to put into that to achieve success.
Can I add in one thing about that? The DESE recently sent out a survey to the Math Leadership Network, because districts are asking for guidance on pathways from middle to high school. So this is a question that's happening all over. There's no clear answer. There's no formula. And so we're hoping, and I filled out the survey, as did the 2 department heads, we're hoping that the DESE can gather information from other districts, including all the Metro West ones, and provide some sort of guidance, because I think it's a conundrum for many.
May I just follow? There must be districts, so in the Commonwealth, that we look to and say they're doing really well. Their numbers are really strong.
Polinera report that we provided last spring, which I'll get to you, Mayor Laredo. The prior committee read that, was actually a national and local benchmarking on this on some of these very topics. Now we'll have to get to the supports because that wasn't included in those, but they were the peer districts across the nation.
It's great. That's exactly what we want to look at. I want to see how that plays out. But thank you.
I also want to mention that early on last year, we did some visits across different school districts within the area. And there was a lot of questioning around, the best way to do this. So I don't think there's like a clear example, but I think different school districts are doing different things.
Again, I understand we're always striving to improve, but there certainly are districts that are doing currently much better than we are, at least in mathematics. And I want to know what they're doing and see how that compares to what we're proposing to do. Thank you.
Victor, did you have your hand up? Then John.
Thank you. Well, first of all, for Dr. Flanagan and Dr. Shore, this is one of the best presentations I've ever seen for a math update. So thank you. I'm very impressed by it. There's a lot of things I saw in here that were very encouraging. I found myself going, I'm going to get them on this one. I'm going to ask this question. Oh, they answered it. And I thought it was phenomenal. My only issue is just that some of the things that are put in footnotes are things I would highlight. I think are fantastic. So this is a fantastic presentation. I'm very impressed. Couple comments and maybe indirectly a question. I'll hold some until after the pilots. I'm going to try to reflect back what I think are implications and let me know if I'm saying anything that is incorrect. One of the, see if I can get back to it. One of the things I really loved is this use of the primary measure of the, I'm going to call it the ARA, the Algebra Readiness Assessment, and that there is a path or a secondary assessment if they fall within the, 80, 89, I think, range, right? And I love the fact that it's evidence-based. I think what we may run into, because we saw variations of it in Arlington, where I worked before, is that you may run into some challenge where some of us will say, well, my teacher's judgment was this, and or parents coming and saying, well, my kid scored on the AMC 12 or the AME or the AP, right? They'll bring in other resources to say, this is why I believe my child should be ready if their child didn't meet the cutoff for whatever reason. To be clear, at some point you just have to draw the line. And I think it's very important to lay out for the community right now that those are things that could happen. But if we're going to go down this path, which I do believe we should, we have to be consistent, and it will be tough. There'll be a few cases, I'm sure, where some parents are going to be frustrated saying, my kid is ready, but for whatever reason, they didn't, meet the threshold. I am reassured by the fact that, again, you're using multiple assessments through multiple periods of time longitudinally to make this happen. So I think that's, to me, a very, very critical point when doing something like this. But is that fair representation? Unfair? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked a lot about with our team that this is our first year doing it and that this will be a learning experience for us as well. And we'll readjust as we need to.
I think that's the perfect attitude for that. My only pause, and it was raised actually by the superintendent, so I give her full credit to this, is as we roll this out, and I say this tongue in cheek, Mayor Laredo, we have to make sure, in my opinion, that sorry, let me step back. I think the superintendent was 100% right that we have to balance this competing interest of, gosh, my kids are going to be graduating in X number of years, and at the same time, this is a big change. It's going to take the educators some time to wrap their heads, no matter how good they are. This is difficult. And so what I don't want to repeat is the challenges of implementation that mixed level, depending on with whom you spoke, ran into, right? And so to me, that's like, hey, PD becomes super important, not just PD in the sense of cursory one, but PD that they can actually say, I really do get and understand that. And that obviously has funding implications that we have to figure out. Now, I'm going to defer to you because we gave you guidance in terms of what the budget priorities are. I think it's number, 5 or 6 in the 5, I think, in the new structure. But that's a point I think just cannot be overlooked is, if we are collectively going to make this happen, we have to make sure that the PD is commensurate to make this not a point of stress for our educators. But I am, so I'm less asking a question, more making remarks, but I'm very curious about that. Is there any reason at this point in time to believe that we might be either having challenges in terms of the time available or the budget available to do the PD that would be adequate to do this? And maybe that's a longer term conversation.
I mean, they're both going to be challenges, but you're right. If we don't provide the ongoing reliable PD over this 3-year transition, we will fail our educators. We will do exactly what happened to them before.
I'll withhold until I'll let other folks speak until after the pilots.
Jonathan, I think you were next.
We talk. So I think I get the 8th grade entry rubric. Like that makes total sense, and I understand. And I, like others, I support that. Help me understand a little bit more about, like, can you talk a little bit more about the movement between, I guess I shouldn't call them tracks, but the different pathways within the program after that? Because I think I heard, maybe I heard wrong, but I think I heard something to the effect of, like, we have to make sure the schedule synced up because students might move even within a year, within the same academic year between classes. So yeah, actually this is, I think, like the most helpful graphic for that. How do I think about mobility between the classes in a year? How's that?
That's exactly the conversations that we're having with our high schools right now. So there's nothing that we can give you that's concrete. A lot of this is going to be, a work in development. But we needed to have some type of blueprint to kind of work from. But in terms of like, are you asking like what a typical like 9th grader or 10th grader pathway might look like moving through this? Is that your question?
I don't know that we know the typical 8th grade person yet. Because we're doing STAR assessments and they take us to the benchmark and maybe slightly above, and they're time tests and they're adaptive, right? So, but if I'm a truly exceptional math student, it's not going to test my ceiling. So I don't know until we start to get to more complex assessments about what we're really talking about. So like, we shouldn't be throwing around like percentages or guesses about who's going to be in what section. Bottom line, if you already completed 9th grade math in 8th grade, you would move to the next course, which is blue, integrated math. Whether you are an accelerated person or not within that, we have to work with our high school educators to say, what are those rising accelerated kids? What is that? So what is that course going to look like in terms of pacing, scope and sequence, depth and complexity? So that's why we're really going all in on a curriculum resource that allows for that kind of differentiation. And that's the PD that Victor's talking about, right? That there's always going to be variance. Even if you're placed in an honors class, there's going to be variance. Like our teachers need to be given the resources to, oh, that's fascinating. I know they really like the math presentation. So we just have to address that variance that's within any class. But with 5 courses instead of 1, we definitely, students are more finely getting what they need in more directed fashion. It depends on how your kid does each year, whether they progress in a level, stay at a particular level or pathway, or move up or down, if you will.
Can I just also add, Anna, that one of our main focuses right now is really trying to define what these courses can entail. So for example, we're focusing on the Math 1, 2, and 3 right now because those are the state grade level courses and those are the priorities. And so one of the things that we've discovered in our self-study and just talking across the district is that, for example, an integrated Math 3 at South is different than an integrated Math 3 at North. So those like really embedded kind of conversations have to happen in terms of, the standard curriculum before we get into a lot of the other details. But there's a lot of variance in terms of what these courses mean throughout the district. I can tell you another example is at the foundations class. You see it up there for foundations. It's 9th grade. Foundations 2 is in the 10th grade. It's only offered at South. It's not offered at North. And so we've got to clean up a lot of those misalignments.
Can I try one more? Maybe
Yeah.
let me try my question one more time. Is it the whole, I get that there's a ton to flesh out and I completely respect that. And I appreciate the transparency on that. That makes a ton of sense to me. I guess my question is the hope and the desire and the vision at the moment that somebody or a student who comes into 10th grade in integrated math 2, if it's just going really well for them and they clearly need more, more opportunity or have a chance to do more, that within the year they might get bumped into integrated math 3? Like, is that the way we're thinking about this? Or
It's a
did I
little bit more,
misunderstand?
no, I think it's a little bit more complex than that.
Okay.
We are somewhat constrained by the schedule and staffing. And so that is going to be impacting how the movement actually happens.
Okay.
So that's something that we have to flush out. But I would want to say that our priority right now is the actual courses, and then we can work out on how the movement will take place.
Got it. And so the base expectation is that the movement happens kind of intra-year or inter-year, not intra-year.
Right. And like currently some high schools will have that movement happen within like the first 6 weeks of school when you've had a chance to kind of know your students.
Like a trial
Right,
period, and that
correct.
makes a lot of sense.
Right. And we might determine mid-year there's an opportunity. That's why the alignment is so important, that these courses look the same at both high schools.
I get
because
that.
if we don't have that, that can cause a lot of issues with the movement piece.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my final, if I might, who pays for summer school? Do parents pay for summer school? Do we pay for summer school?
Well, it depends on the district. The district has not paid for it before, except through Title I funding in recent time. So the best practices in the business, if you will, are that there should be some skin in the game from the family member, right? So, and we do that for the calculus project. That is a summer program that is partially grant funded, partially district funded, and partially fee funded. So we're working out those details with NCE now.
Thank you.
It's built into my future budget proposal to you for FY27.
Okay, we have Tamika, then Linda.
Actually, Alicia, it's okay with me if you go to Linda first. I feel like she was timed to these two last point.
Thanks. Actually, my question piggybacks after Jonathan's, which is, you acknowledge that there could be some fluidity, particularly in the beginning of the year. So to accommodate some of that fluidity, are we looking at making changes in the high school schedule so that, you know, once it, to enable fluidity to happen? Because maybe I have math that, you know, a certain block, but then the math that's better suited for me is another time, and then my whole schedule blows up. Like,
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. We're still trying to focus on, like I said earlier, the basic alignment of the
Yep.
courses, but all of that will have to be flushed out at some point.
yep,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan and Linda, your points were where I had some, I won't call them reservations, but those are my like logistical issues when we first discussed this, when you ladies were before the school committee a year ago. Time is fluid. But I also want to talk about, you know, the superintendent mentioned that it's been 2.5 years of thinking about how to tackle this issue. And when we first started having these conversations, I remember there was this push to say, just get it done, just change it tomorrow. And it's easy. I think the fact that you've been at this for 2.5 years, and that what we have sitting in front of us is thoughtful, it is deeply, deeply complex. And even so, you're still saying we need a little bit of time, and we need your patience, and we need your trust to do the details. The devil is in the details, and you still are, you're working on them and making sure that they are doing all the things. And I wrote down all the things when you were talking. You promised that through this plan, our students, when they're ready to make a move, they'll be able to make a move. That the students will be, who are ready for advancement, they'll have advancement. The students needing additional supports, they will have additional supports. That there's a, you've also worked on the foundational tenets, which are to ensure that this is a uniform system that is aligned and sequenced and scoped across our district, and that it has a rigorous, fulfilling curriculum that meets the needs of our students and our staff. I think the additional point on this was that it was an objective decision tree rather than a subjective one. That's key for me. It avoids some of the ills, if you will, of the past, which got us, quite frankly, into some of those old systems that we're looking to change now. And it's got a built-in cycle of review. Gina, you promised that you'd be back within a year to say, how are we doing? And that it's going to continue thereafter. So all this to say, it makes total sense to me that it wasn't an immediate change. It couldn't be. Not if we were trying to do a thorough, really just job for our students and for our staff and for the families who are really hungry for this type of change. You know, I do have some detailed bits, and I again, I trust you that we're figuring it out, but most of them are just about how do kids move? Like, how fluid are the fluid paths? And I think the next time when we talk about it, it would be really helpful to have a few scenarios just mapped out. We know it's not everybody's, you know, standard path, but to say a student who's struggling, who starts, you know, 8th grade here, this is their path through their trajectory through high school. We only require 2 years of math. And so if I'm a struggling student, am I going to be in the foundations of math as a freshman, and then foundations of math as a sophomore, and then I'm done? Or am I going to have some type of additional thrust that says, you've got more to give, and here are your pathways? So I'd love for us to talk about those avenues as well, because I think
the multitude of advanced courses available for the kids who are coming in ninth grade with their integrated math 2 honors option, are they then going to be able to go to, where do they go? You know, are they jump into 10th grade, or can they go past that if they're ready? So I think those are the things you're grappling with. That's where my mind goes. And how easy and nimble is it going to be for them to make those changes? But I commend you on the work. It's excellent. To anyone who said, do it yesterday, I hope you can see that yesterday was an unrealistic goal. And this is a realistic goal. So I approve and thank you for that.
Just want to put one more complication on our plates, and that is that the governor and her graduation council put out new graduation requirements. So the Mass Core is what they're advocating. So that's 4 years of math, right? And financial literacy for everyone. So that'll be interesting if that's required. And then end of course assessments, which we have no details on yet either. So a little bit of our wait and see is also, if they're going to dictate what the end of course assessments are, that may actually impact how we write our course curriculum. And so we just have to see what that is. And we don't know yet. We don't have one snippet of info.
We'll also really echo the thanks, both in terms of, an arc of a long process, working with your colleagues and listening across the community to get to here. I think a lot of my questions that I've phrased coming into this have been answered in the presentation. So I'm very grateful for that. I just want to take one moment on some of them just to replay what I think I'm hearing. I'd asked about, as we move to this model, is there more or less or equivalent spread of content progression and depth? I'm hearing significantly more. I think that's going to be really exciting to the community. I think similarly, acknowledging the points that the superintendent made in terms of tough order that multi-level posed for teachers and the experience that folks had. I think in terms of in a single classroom, the level of content heterogeneity is being brought down. I think that's really responsive to what we've heard from teachers, from students and parents. And so I'm really glad for that. I think the clarifications that the superintendent gave on the sort of 5 levels are really good, but I will just echo my colleague Tamika's suggestion that at the right time, bringing it to life with this is what happens to Johnny and this is what happens with Susie in these, yes, maybe caricatured scenarios, but I think it would really help people understand would be excellent. But I'm really excited for the structure. There were a couple just technical questions I had on that. I'm not sure I fully understood that slide number 9 when we were looking at the different options. There was a note about integrative math 1 honors, and I apologize if I missed, but what was the thinking behind that? And was that covered in the 5 levels, or did I miss that?
So that's something that we're kind of, again, we have to develop as we kind of go through this, but we were actually just talking about this today.
Math 2.
So did you mention?
Well,
one?
The note on the side.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was actually brought up by one of our high school principals as well, is that, say that you have a student who has taken the standard level integrated math, but maybe not ready to take the integrated math 2, but wants a little bit more challenge. Do we provide that as a pathway for those students in need? So we're thinking at it from all angles and truly being focused on giving students what they need when they need it. So those kind of questions have to be fleshed out. But we're looking at all scenarios and trying to figure out what does each student need beyond some of these courses.
And then, I think extending what the superintendent described in terms of the 5 levels to Susie and Johnny working their way through, for example, I think I heard that there's the option for someone who places in such a way to go straight from 8th grade into integrated math 3. Did I hear that correctly?
We don't know that yet.
taking that illustrative example back a layer, I just want to be,
So are you talking about the students who take the assessment to skip the ninth grade?
yeah. Is that into integrated math 2 honors, or is that?
That's two
Two
honors.
honors.
2 honors,
Yep.
okay, that's what's indicated in this final box, thank you. And then I'm not seeing integrated math 2 honors in 10th grade, but especially if we build that ninth grade for integrated 1 honors in 10th grade, presumably you could also go into.
Yeah,
integrated
we talked about putting that in, but if you start putting it in, this thing is going to look really wide scaled. So that is an option.
Understood. And I was just clarifying. And then, again, in that model, and this was addressing the question, but I just want to explore it one click further, is because of the potential to be bumped, you would have ninth graders potentially with 10th graders in such a course.
That's a reality. Yeah.
Yep. And maybe that's productive, but I just am, is there a chance that the pacing would then be different for that ninth grader with the 10th grader? The needs would be different. I guess we're saying at this point, we would be putting them in that same class because their pacing needs are probably the same.
Right.
Thank you.
And there's precedence for this now. We do it in some classes, in elective classes, world language classes. So there is some precedent.
And then, if I may, on the middle school side, first going to the testing rubric, which I believe is on slide 39. So we are creating, if I'm playing back correctly, on the far left-hand side, the algebra readiness assessment. That's the 15-question test that is in the process of creating now. We do have test data, if I'm not correct, on previous cohorts of STAR and Desmos. So we at least have an illustrative sense of how this year's 1 year advanced now, but we have a sense of how Newton kids are doing on those 2 tests. And that
Not necessarily with Desmos. We've been
Sorry.
implementing that as a common assessment this year.
Collecting it.
Yeah, collecting as a district level. Yeah.
Okay. But Desmos is under collection. STAR, certainly we do have, and that informs at least that component of the thinking of the distribution and the percentages we're looking for.
So I just want to be clear, you mean percentage and distribution of students in levels, because we will make the number of courses that there are students eligible for. There's no target, there's no cap.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that because I did hear your helpful comments on that. What I meant was this like STAR 90% domain mastery
Yep.
percentage was us looking at what that 90% represents, probably matching it a bit to the previous STAR data we do have and saying that's a reasonable fit for our community and what we think would be a discrete course offering.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, ethically, we all agree. We think it's inhumane to put students into a class that they're not actually ready for. That doesn't mean we close the door and they never get to go there. But I've never seen STAR data like this. In the 20 years I've been using these products in Metro West, it's so high compared to any other area I've seen for our rising middle school students. So let's keep that train going, right? Let's get people where they want to be and meet the moment.
I love it. We are mostly referencing Desmos here. I don't want to jump into the pilot. I know that there's 2 curriculums that we piloted there. That's not a decision we've made yet, correct?
It's not.
Okay. So that brings me to my next point around PD and training. I really appreciate the comments that my colleagues and you all have made about the significant importance of the time it will take to invest in that and have those collaborative discussions. I guess I'm focusing on middle school now because it seems like, especially to your chart number 36, that's where it's all kind of happening literally right now. And so I guess broader comment and then back to that curriculum point. I think it would be great if we had a sense based on the comments we've heard in the spring as we're getting closer and making more of these discrete decisions, if we had a sense of the timelines for when PD is happening, how it's being brought along, when are we making, because I'm understanding, I think it's a very helpful description on slide 36 of this sliding from red to yellow of the top level. And I think that's responsive to kids' needs, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm thinking about it as a layperson correctly, though, that means if I'm a teacher of those kids, I'm actually going to make across, this year to 28, 29, 4 different versions of my course that's maybe similar content, but I'm sliding the pacing or something along those lines each year. So how we're sort of getting ready for that or supporting that, I think is really helpful. And then my comment on top of that is, what do we do if we are switching curricula? And if that's something we want to table for the pilot, I'm
That
happy
would be
to do that.
appreciated. I also want to mention that we have a new director of professional learning who right now is starting to coordinate what the actual logistics of professional development will look, not only in the summer, but the next couple of years. So we do have a plan, and we do have somebody that's their job. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues' compliments on this work. This is not just sort of compliments of form. I think that you gave us something that communicates what you're trying to say really effectively. And I'm very grateful for that. I think you got through and you landed the plane on the 8th grade, the middle school, how it's going to play out over a bunch of years. That had been confusing before.
Okay.
Visual works. The assessments at the end of thinking about the kid who doesn't test well. That's a problem. I'm also thinking about the teachers. I think you indicated that they will be to not be asked to have a voice in that. Is it that?
Not necessarily. I don't think I think it varies in terms of the recommendation piece. At the appeals process, our teachers are very happy that we are kind of laying the line down.
They'll
that.
make recommendations.
Yeah.
We'll make
Yeah.
recommendations. It's not 100% on the.
We don't want to put children in a class they're not ready for. That's our major driving force. So the way you show that is by how you perform on assessment tasks, right? And people get extended time and all the accommodations that they need in order for the playing field to be level. All those accommodations are in play.
And I think we want to see, like, this is our first time doing this, and we want to make sure that we're doing right by kids and not getting them in a situation where they're struggling, they're feeling anxious. So, I think the first year will be very key in terms of like, do those metrics work? And as I said earlier, if we find that, we need to adjust, we certainly could do that.
All right. Picking up on Jason's comments a minute ago about broadening the scope of what we're doing, but narrowing what's happening in a particular classroom. Will different levels be taught within one classroom?
We have 5 courses that students are being placed in. You want me to tell you how many ACP kids, formerly known as ACP and CP, will be in each level, and I don't know that. So we're just testing kids and we're saying these are the criteria to get into that course. And so I can't answer for you what that combination
Sorry,
is
that's
going to
not
be.
what I'm asking. In a classroom, will there be kids who are in different courses?
In different courses? No.
Different levels of a course?
No, there are different courses, and within that, there will be a range of students who aren't identical. And so there will have to be some differentiation in every course.
So when we look at slide 19,
so every grade level has 2 experiences that you're seeing there in blue, right? That are, apologize.
It can be 9.
Yeah,
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So is there a situation where multiple boxes here would be in one classroom?
No.
Good. On the urgency question that we heard from a public commenter, I think we've all heard a lot of feedback from the teachers that the pace of change has been a lot. I agree with the sense of urgency. but I look at this and I say, this is so fast. I don't know how we could push it any faster on the teachers, given what we've already asked of them in a period of time. So I appreciate the concern. I understand that kids aren't getting the year back. They're all advancing another year. This is forward progress. This is fast progress. And I'm satisfied with the urgency. So thank you for thinking about that and for being thoughtful about the pace that it goes through. Thank you.
We had Ari and then Tamika, but Tamika, did you have a more urgent?
Thank you both for this tonight. This is amazing and so exciting to see happening in our schools. I want to echo kind of multiple comments that my colleagues have mentioned of making sure we are ensuring PD for our educators is happening at a good timeline for them. This is a lot of change. I'm a little overwhelmed hearing about all the change. So I can only imagine what's happening on that day to day. But overall, this is great. And I think my question is mainly for you. We'll hear pilot recommendations in the spring and take a vote on that. And then once implementation starts to happen, and this could have been totally for the second one, but I'm going to ask it now, is how are we as a school committee going to be hearing updates from you guys, from your team on what's working, what's not working, and how often is that going to be happening?
Well, Ari, thank you for the layup into the item we will not get to tonight, which is the strategic plan and the data dashboard. So when we wrote the strategic plan, we put in there collection of common assessment data, our STAR data, all the things that are like when you go to the doctor and each year you get your temperature taken and you get your blood drawn and all that. We tried to make that dashboard like that would say, you've made these changes to academic programs, whether they're in English or math or what have you. How's it going? Like, is it actually is it changing anything? So that's where we intended that to be. Now, your colleagues have had a lot of questions about the dashboard and whether it's the right stuff or the wrong stuff. So we'll probably have that conversation maybe tonight, maybe not. So that's where we think it's going to be. So if we're collecting whatever the new curriculum is, the teachers will curate the common assessments and we will say, these are the things that say that students have mastered this course content. So of course, waiting for the governor to get us some info on that too. So once that's all in the pot, we'll be reporting to you what the benchmarks are for that, just like we are with STAR data.
So I have what I think might be a quick clarifying question about the high school math in 8th grade. Will students be given the option of getting credits for that class?
In high school?
In 8th grade?
For the 8th grade?
No,
if it's no, so that is not, okay.
So NAACP, you get it in high school.
I think it's not said, and I think it should be said as something just to make sure that folks have a clear understanding of what it's going to be, the offering. They're going to have that higher rigorous level of class, but you will not be able to get high school credit for that class. So this is more, think of it as a boost or a prep for the high school experience. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate, by the way, Tamika, you clarifying that. That wasn't clear to me as well. Sorry, just to go back to the testing question for 1 second. What is and the answer can be still to be determined, of course. For those who say, even after accommodations, time and a half, whatever the case might be for each student's necessary needs, I'm just not a good test taker. There are other ways in which I can demonstrate proficiency. What, if at all, is our response for that?
Well, I would say right now, it's like you said, very much in development. I think that, bottom line right now is we want to make sure that the kids that are placed in the proper place will be successful in their challenge. And, we might down the road kind of change our thinking in terms of how we place kids. We have to have a baseline to make sure that our metrics are the right metrics to have and that our kids are getting what they need and not struggling and not being over anxious because they're placed in the wrong place. I don't know, do you have anything to that?
Testing is a part of all the courses, so I would think that that student would have accommodations for test taking, and those would be applied in the readiness assessment.
But like Dr. Flanagan said, we don't want to place kids where they're going to struggle for the year.
I also want to say like the open response questions that we've been discussing that are related to the mathematical practices. Those are not like one right or wrong answer. They are all about, measuring students' computation, problem solving skills. So that gives students a real opportunity to show what they know in a different way. So instead of just having like a right or wrong answer on a multiple choice, it does give teachers a good insight of if they are mathematical thinkers to the degree the course requires.
Perfect. No, I'm just making sure it's not like what we're perceiving as, oh, it's only a test of procedural fluency or a case might.
Yeah,
might
no,
be,
and that's something we definitely are anticipating that we're going to have to develop over the course of a couple of years.
Got it. So that, and again, this is sort of a more macro comment for us, but down the road, because this is so robust in terms of the information, I think we're going to have to do. I'm just thinking about the literacy, town hall that was done the other night, which I thought was really, really well done. We're gonna have to do some version of this, I think, to slowly explicate
April
this. I know-
2nd, April 2nd, we've already
Oh,
published
April
the
2nd.
date.
got it.
Yep.
Perfect.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
we had a game.
We'll see you there.
Thank you very much.
Jonathan?
Maybe this is part of what I was trying to ask earlier. Like, isn't there fundamentally, for the point that Victor was banging on here, like, isn't there fundamentally, if we have in-year mobility within the courses, isn't there fundamentally a release valve for this issue of like the 4 test taker, of which Jonathan Green was one, right? I mean, isn't that like you say, like in the first several weeks of the year, you're going to pay attention to how kids are doing. Like, are they, they feel like they're placed correctly? I mean, fundamentally, that's a release valve for that problem, no?
Well, it's also, we have to get the curriculum, the pacing guide and the scoping all aligned too. We have to make sure that our teachers are kind of in the right place, because if that movement's going to happen, there's going to have to be an alignment in terms of.
Yeah, but I
curriculum
mean, I'm just saying, even like assuming we've gotten this, working like a, we've got this into a finely oiled machine, right? That is the fix. Is that not the fix for that?
Could be.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, my experience with it is in that, 6-week drop ad type moment in the beginning of a semester.
Yeah.
Like the students relax, they get to know the teachers, and then all the secret sauce of their math capacity can sometimes come out.
Also, all of the conniving of the parents who figure out that that's the back door. That's the
Well,
back door
listen,
too.
we're going to all have to hold hands on that committee, because they're going to come for you as the policymakers. And, we want to make sure that students are appropriately placed, and, creep due to parental aggression is not a good math placement strategy, right?
Supportive.
I also, if I may, Madam Chair, just say, I just want to say, we are still a high school, right? And so, I already had some requests like this morning, like, are you going to offer, college courses to our kids in high school? And like, I understand that some people do that, and we do offer AP classes. That said, I just want to caution everywhere. It's kind of a race to nowhere if you're out of math courses by the time you're, in 10th grade. Like, we can give you electives, but I just want people to kind of think long-term about the whole picture of the young person. And like, we don't want kids sitting there in the current experience with 39% or less growth for kids. We don't want the stagnant piece. But at the same time, they're high school students, and I don't think we well serve them if we send them off to college before they're even done high school. And there's all kinds of considerations for that we would have to negotiate with our teachers union anyway. So I'll just park that there.
I would like to read a commendation from Paul Sherman, who wrote the Polynera report. He's sort of one of our many Newton community math experts. And this specifically relates to the placement process, because I think what we're ultimately guarding against there is that the strength of some parents' advocacy does not advantage their child over someone whose parent perhaps does not know to even begin to advocate, right? So he says the 8th grade placement process is robust, transparent, and well supported by research. Auto enrollment is the gold standard, and the 2-stage process was really well thought out, both to improve robustness, but also to reduce the operational burden of appeals. Let's see how it goes, but perhaps it can serve as a model for other placement processes in the district. Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Do we want to move on from this section into pilots and AGA versus integrated math? That's great.
I assume you're just gonna kind of lay out the framework. We're not making any decision, just give you an explanation of where we're going.
So broad strokes, friends.
Yes. Okay. Pilots, they were great. Um, So we're in
Presentation.
yeah. Phase 2 of the curriculum review cycle involves piloting content. The timeline up there says we're deciding on programming this month, and that we will present to you in the spring for approval. So we're on track. We have a meeting set up for the end of February with the committee, and there's a report being generated right now by Katie Hogue compiling all of the pilot data. So the way the pilots, I don't know where I am on this anymore. I'm so confused. Okay, we had about 70 teachers participating in the pilots across K to 12. We started last spring at the elementary level by looking at gathering samples from all of the different vendors, checking with other districts as to what they're using, looking at everything. We created a rubric based on the DESE rubric, based on Ed Reports and Curate, and we developed it ourselves and tweaked it for the Newton approach, made sure it lined up with Portrait of a Learner and all of the pieces that it needs to address. The elementary math specialist spent a lot of time digging through the content, taking the rubric, looking at the resources and deciding what was closely aligned, what we wanted to move forward. Same thing happened at the middle school with a team of teachers who came in the summer. Same thing happened at the high school in August with a team of teachers composed of North teachers and South teachers together, coming and going through the boxes in my office and looking at all the content and saying, this one works because, this one doesn't work because, and making the decision together. They landed on 2 programs at each level, which we then piloted this fall. And these are the 6 programs. So at the elementary, we looked at Experience Math, which is a Savas product, Amplified Desmos, K to 5. Middle school, we're already using Amplified Desmos, but what I asked of the teams was to pilot a unit with Fidelity, use all of the pieces, use the language routines, use the digital assessments, use all of the bells and whistles that you may not have used prior. So really try out a unit. And then we had mid-school math, which is a very different program. High school, they decided, the team of teachers landed on CPM, Math, and Carnegie Learn. So those are the 2 programs.
Just in full transparency as well, I just want you to be aware that at the high school, one of the things that they've been discussing and asking in terms of the final decision is there a possibility to develop a hybrid utilizing a foundational curriculum and then adding it, creating the Newton way of mathematical thinking, or do we want to develop something completely different? So I just want you to know that these are kind of the conversations that we're having, particularly at the high school level.
So the feedback that we collected that's now being compiled came from teachers, students, and administrators via lots of different ways. We use thought exchange. So we have surveys from multiple points during the process. We had rubrics that we developed to look at the content. Teachers who were not piloting were asked to use that rubric to evaluate the programs that were being piloted, so they also had a voice. Throughout this entire process, every email and every message that I sent was the teachers' voices needed to be the loudest. You are doing the lifting of this content, and we need to hear what you think. We developed an observation rubric, which we sent out to all administrators and colleagues, classroom teachers. And the idea was that you go into a classroom of a piloting program. So I'd go into a grade 2 at Lincoln Elliott, and I would take notes against the rubric on the program, and then I would turn it into this major receptacle. So we had, I don't know how many observation rubrics came in, but they came from all different educators, and that's part of what's being compiled now. We have the decision-making process, which was developed by the Office of Teaching and Learning, and we use discussion protocols to talk about different programs and what so we actually were doing that. I'm doing that Wednesday morning with math specialists at the elementary level. I'm doing it Thursday afternoon with the 36 math teachers at the middle school level, and then the department heads are doing it Thursday afternoon with their teams, and we're following the same protocol to discuss the data that has come out of the pilots. That's all being compiled right now by the Office of Data.
And those links in the presentation are live, so if you're curious about some of the things that we're referencing, you can actually see them by clicking on the links.
We had listening sessions that Dr. Nolan and Dr. Flanagan and Dr. Roundtree participated in at North and South to get feedback from teachers. And Dr. Flanagan and I did the same thing with the middle school teachers. So we really tried to elevate the teacher voice. That was a huge piece of this process, was we needed to hear from them. So I was thrilled that we had over 70 teachers willing to pilot these lessons, because it does make it more complicated. We had to readjust scopes and sequence, because if we were asking them to pilot fractions in grade 3 in September, it can't do it again in investigations in the spring. So we had to rework all of the scope and sequence for each grade level to make the pilots work, and the teachers were very amenable.
And as she mentioned earlier, Katie Hogue, who's our chief of data research, she's compiling all the data, and you'll have access to the report to see how it all kind of fleshed out.
This is just how the process would happen, kind of the hierarchy. Hierarchy is not the right word. The roles and responsibilities. Ultimately, a presentation will come to all of you for final approval in the spring. But I worked very closely with Jen Letourneau and Alan Krause. And I actually have a couple of middle school teachers consulting with me now as we work through all of the data and think about what the citywide should look like, so that we're giving teachers, again, the voice and the feedback opportunities.
And I just want to stress that the Office of Teaching and Learning, our role is really to help with facilitating these conversations and the logistics needed. So for example, when it came time to we're going to talk about in a few minutes, the integrated math versus AGA, we created a protocol to make that process a little bit easier and consistent across the district. So that's really our role, but we really work really hard to make elevating the teacher's voice. So the department chairs have been just amazing in terms of helping us coordinate that on the ground level. And then eventually the Math Curriculum Review Committee will take all of that information, and then they will put forth a recommendation to you all based on all the things that we discussed in an earlier slide.
This is just another version of the timeline. The teachers started last spring and last summer, choosing programs, going through and analyzing, and then at the pilots, teachers volunteered in. The math specialists, the elementary level, supported the pilots. At the middle school, it was, and then at the high school was the department heads. And so now we're at the point of, and I'm excited, we haven't seen the report. We're waiting. I keep texting Katie, anything? So we're very close. Hopefully tomorrow we're going to see a version of it. But we're excited to take it to the next step, which is to present it back to the teams and have a protocol to talk about what the data is telling us, and then to bring it.
Any questions about the pilots? Right.
I know I don't have to tell you this, but I guess it's more framing about the next step expectations. When you come back with the with the recommendation on the new curriculum, in keeping with past precedent, that you'll include for us the pros, the cons, the gaps, because there will be gaps in whatever curriculum you're putting forward, and then the plan for how to fill those gaps or how to supplement what that looks like. And of course, the cost will also be something featured quite prominently.
So the good news is that's already paid for.
I love that, but just understanding what we're looking at, paid for this year. We got to keep an eye on future years as well. But and then any IT components or things like that.
Yeah,
So-
that's built into, if you look at that document, the Curriculum Review Committee final recommendation form, we've tried to capture a lot of what you just mentioned so that when you get that recommendation, it's kind of got it all built into it. Okay.
Awesome. As expected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again. I appreciate this. The curriculum under review, just some questions around, or just curiosities around there. So first, I think my first observation is, for the most part, those are all well-regarded curricula that have been, most of them, around for some time. So I think that's important for the community to know, is this is not flash in the pan solutions for the most part. Experienced Math, though, my understanding is that's like a 2023 release or something, relatively new, right? And there's no, sorry, Dr. Hershey, for hearing this. I've mixed feelings about the ed reports and how they do their methodology, but to my knowledge, there's no information on Experienced Math, because it's so new, on the ed report side or on What Works Clearinghouse or anything like that. Is there anything data, like what drove, I guess, something so new being selected, if that's even something you can allude to now?
Sure. We, at Marion Small.
A lot of respect for her. Yeah.
Marion Small, Grant Fletcher are some of the authors of the program. And it's similar to investigations, but it asks deeper questions and really pushes kids to think differently about concepts. And embedded in that is professional development for educators. So it's a slightly different approach, the strength of which is the prompting and question. It really does force kids to think about things in different ways, to its credit.
Yep.
There are other pieces that, and again, we have to wait for the report to come out, but there are other pieces that we had a lot of questions about. They have sent us, since we started, they got California approval, which is a pretty high hurdle.
Yep.
And they've sent us several data research papers and white papers on their background. So it's Savas's new program. It takes a few things and combines them. We had a webinar with Graham Fletcher the other day to talk about his contributions and really the math behind it. And it was during the day, it was at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, teachers' time, that's their PLC time or their planning time. And we had over 60 educators log on, just elementary level, which is, I think, says something about him and the program itself. So it is new, you're right. It doesn't have the legs that a lot of the other programs have, but it's exciting in other ways.
It being experiential based, does that mean it has more manipulatives than in the past, or is it pretty comparable?
Similar, same.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like what we got to refresh in future years as these become ongoing expenses. And last question, I guess, is you actually mentioned this, I think, Dr. Flanagan, the mid-school math transition to CPM, because they're very different. How I'm just trying to wrestle with the student's experience of, oh, cool, I've learned this particular system. Now I'm switching in high school. How do we smooth that journey a little bit?
We've thought a lot about that because if we put an integrated one in 8th grade, the kids would have K-5 program, 6-7 program, different integrated one program, and then go up to high school. Mid-school math has a 5th grade. We toyed with K-4 one program, 5-7 another. Like, there's lots of iterations. I really think we got to wait to see what the teachers and what the data tells us. But we are thinking about that and really want the consistency of programming for students. We don't want that choppiness to it. One of the things that I really like about the pathways is the research shows us that Algebra 1, or kind of that integrated one flip, is where a lot of kids fall off. So giving students an opportunity to experience that in grade 8 and then possibly experience it again in grade 9, but with a different program, it might look a little bit different, concepts are the same, I think will have a lot of value for students. And then they're not lost because they actually did master those concepts and move forward as a 10th grader. We can't put the same program twice.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of having something 6, 7, 8, something different, 9 forward, for that exact reason.
And we've also been looking at not just the curriculum, but different instructional pedagogies that we might want to adopt in relation to the curriculum. So thinking classrooms is something that's kind of gotten some traction within the district. So it might be that and something else.
No, that's helpful. I'm not expecting you to do it. I'm gonna look for myself to see what districts may have done similar type transitions before, just to understand how that worked. And then my last question, I guess, or last comment maybe is, you mentioned something that's interesting, and I'm kind of wrestling with this in my mind, the desire or the expressed desire for potentially a hybrid solution that encompasses I hate the term box curriculum, but let's say, box curriculum plus some adaptation. I know you know this, but I'm just gonna say this out loud. The thing I'm trying to balance in my mind is you want to make sure that the expertise of the educators, I don't want them to be automatons. That part that they've said to me, if that resonates with me a lot. At the same time, I'm concerned that especially for some of these like Amplify and CPM that have been around for Carnegie too, for that matter, for a while. Not that Fidelity has to be the only way that you follow things, but I am very concerned that if you deviate too much from that process, all the theoretical underlying research then goes out the window, right? And so I'm trying to find that careful balance of trust the teachers to have that discretion for the differentiation in classroom, but I'm cautious about starting a hybrid process that then becomes, oh, we'll have 2 variations and 3 variations. The next thing you know, it's all of a sudden we're back to 4.5 different curricula that didn't exist before.
But I mean, particularly about hybrids as well, is we know that like there's not one curriculum, one size fits all. It's going to meet all of our needs. So as we kind of dive into these curriculums and find an area that we like all these things, but it doesn't do this, that's where we would bring in some alternative resources and think differently how we want to approach that.
I mean, to be clear, I do think the educators have some very good experiences that they can bring in. So we do want to have a path for them to express that insight. It's just, like I said, just walking that careful timeline, I think is very critical. Thank you.
If I can, I just want to get away from the words standardized curriculum and box curriculum because that just stokes the fear of our educators that we just, because we have highly trained, amazing teachers, and we are going to count on them to curate materials that an agreed upon scope and sequence and set of common assessments. What you can do is say, this is the catcher's mitt that we're looking for you to throw into, right? You say in the dashboard, this is what we're going to collect and look at the health of the system with, right? And each of these has different ways to do that. Each of these curricula could be identified common assessments, it could be projects, it could be, ways of applying mathematical thinking. So I think what we want is a good portfolio, but our teachers are going to curate from those materials, because the last thing I want any teacher thinking is it's like Tuesday, you all need to be on page 32. Like there's none of that, right? Like, just like we're doing with EL, we're saying, that's our elementary literacy, like these are the end assessments and you have to figure out how to get there. We're going to give you a whole ton of good differentiated resources, but they're going through and planning that as grade level teams responsive to their kids' data. That's really how it should work.
I think that's a fantastic point that I do not like the concept of box, do not like common standards, because it just gives the wrong impression. Completely agree with you there. And I think, again, some of these were competitors of mine in the past, and so I have a lot of respect. I know the processes through which they do this. They're checking, like you said, there's a California adoption that took place. They're betting against Texas. They're betting against Louisiana. There are lots of different teachers that have different use cases that go into these programs before they're able to survive for this long. So I do think that, even for these ones, there is flexibility within that to exercise professional judgment in the process. So thank you for re-elevating that, Dr. Nolan.
Okay.
Thanks again for answering some of my previous questions, and your presentation your presentation really helped address those. Just a minor one that came up for me in the elementary side. I believe the current curriculum there in use is investigations. Is that planning to be part of the evaluation set going forward as something that there's already experience with, or are we down to these two that have been piloted?
We're so excited to see the report. We just don't know. I think there is the possibility that if experience or Amplified doesn't meet the hurdles that we've set for it, then there is the option that we would stay with investigations, and we would have to make some changes to it. We would have to really look at it and think about where are the holes and where is it falling down and what do we need to do to adjust it. But I think it's a possibility. I don't know how probable it is, but it's certainly still on the table.
And then maybe just a brief follow-up for that. It's really exciting what's happening in the middle school and the opportunities that's provided. Is there any scope or potential for elementary to be helping bridge some of that, or could there be more pacing changes at the elementary school level? I'm just curious if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we talked about that. The standard algorithm for division could be at the end of 5th grade and taken off the 6th grade plate. So these conversations are happening. How do we alleviate kind of some of what's been put on the middle school? Because they're bearing the bulk of it right now, for sure. So we have started that. Again, like you said before, if we end up adopting a different content in elementary, that's going to take a lot of energy and time before we can then say, great, now we need you to also do this. So it is part of the conversation, but there are so many moving parts, and we kind of have to wait for things to settle before we can decide. But yes, we have talked.
Thank you.
Shall we go to integrated math?
Hope you're still with us. This is the last part. All right, rein it in. So one of the questions that was really important part of this process is what model of mathematics do we follow for the high school integrated math versus AGA, which is algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. For those of you who aren't aware, we currently do integrated math in our high schools. And this question really came to us from our teachers. When we did a survey in our self-study way back in the last fall, teachers wanted to have a conversation about this to see, like, just to make sure that we were doing the right thing and that we were going in the right direction. So this conversation is really teacher generated. One of the things that we all agreed upon is that we would focus on what best structures or what structure best supports the conceptual understanding, the long-term retention, and really prepares kids for college and career readiness in life. For those of you and for people who are watching who might not understand the different two models, we kind of try to break it down in these two visuals. So traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2 is what many of us across the country in our and when we were growing up were exposed to, where you have algebra in grade 9, geometry in 10, and algebra 2 in grade 11. And just by looking at this, you can see that when teaching in this format, they're very siloed domains, which means that there isn't a lot of correlation between how these mathematical topics kind of weave with each other. So that's one thing. It is the structure that most high schools do use and our families are most familiar with. It also bodes well for kids who are transferring because this is the system that's done in most high schools. So there's no, kind of trying to figure out, how do we kind of get them up to speed in a different type of math model. It also allows for doubling up in math. So like potentially a student could take algebra 1 and geometry in 1 year, although from a cognitive perspective, it's really not recommended because it is a lot for kids to kind of withhold 2 major courseworks in 1 year. So I just kind of wanted to outline some of the pros and cons in terms of the traditional piece. The integrated piece is something that we have in place now. And one of the things that is interesting about it is that it does blend the algebra 1, geometry, statistics. It's taught annually. Oftentimes, the way it is taught is in real world applications of mathematics. It is in many countries the international standard, so that while we don't see it a lot in the United States, there is a lot, especially in Asian countries. Integrated math is the model that is used. And I guess I said earlier, it emphasizes conceptual connections and real world applications. I think it's really important to mention, though, that both of these models cover the standards from the Department of Elementary Education as well as Common Core standards. The main difference is the sequencing. So when we started to facilitate this conversation, it was really that the high school really wanted us to help them in terms of making sure that it was structured. And so we helped them with garnering the best practices in research. So our district contracts with Hanover Research, so we were able to kind of get some, really high quality research papers to help us with this conversation. We wanted to make sure that our staff had the opportunity to analyze that data from the perspective of coherence, curriculum, systems, and professional development. And then we had to build in an opportunity for them to come together and make some kind of consensus. So in terms of the research, you can see here that there really is not one clear-cut answer. To say one is better than the other is really not the question. The question is, which one of these approaches can be implemented with the greatest coherency, equity, and instructional quality within Newton Public Schools? There's many pros and cons, but the key takeaways were that research is limited. It doesn't define a single best structure. Both teach the same standards, and the outcome depends on the curriculum quality, instructional support, the coherence, and the implementation. And I don't want to go through every single bullet, but as you can see here, there are pros and cons to both. And our teachers took all of these into consideration. Let me get to the next. I just also want to kind of outline the academic consensus that favors the spiral approach. As you can see here, there is evidence to show that there is some studies that show that integrated math 1 outperformed algebra 1 in their peers and standardized measures. You can see here that there was also some research that showed that there was a higher retention in integrated because of that spiraling approach that we talked about earlier. So we had the staff come together and we asked them to work through a discussion protocol. And these are the questions we asked them to focus on. In terms of coherence in learning, which pathway promoted retention and conceptual understanding based on the research that they were reviewing together? We asked them to look at through the eyes of curriculum instruction, what supports do teachers need for planning and pacing? We asked them to look at it from the system and equity side of it. So how does scheduling, placement, and transfer access work? And then from the professional development piece, what training and structures were required for sustainability? And so our teachers, this is a sample of some of the responses that our teachers kind of worked through as they were going through that. And I think one of the biggest pieces to take away from the coherence piece is that our teachers did feel that integrated math supported better retention and conceptual understanding, but they also felt that the current integrated math model that we have needs work, that it is not a truly integrated math model in the sense that we just talked about, and that it's, spiraled, but that in some cases we have some of our integrated math taught like a unit in Algebra 1, and then we move to a unit of geometry, which is not really the integrated model. So our teachers are acknowledging that we, even with staying with integrated 1, there has to be some professional learning and some curriculum alignment work to make it truly the model that it's designed to be. In terms of equity and access, our teachers' feedback was that they did believe that the integrated structure favored diverse learners, and they did recognize that the transfer placement piece was somewhat of a challenge. But what we learned from our staff is that at the high school, for new students who are transferring in, they do give an entrance exam, and that data is used to help kind of fill the gaps in terms of any misalignment that they might, if they were coming from a school that has the Algebra 1 model and we have the integrated piece. Our math department chairs did not really feel that that was a major issue. So I wanted to point that out. So then we had them come together, both high schools. We developed a discussion protocol for them to follow as well in terms of coming up with some kind of cross-school synthesis. And as you can see here in that center bubble there, that resoundingly came over ever and again, is that there is a need for consistent 8 through 12 scope and sequence. That is imperative as we kind of move forward. And then changing to AGA would reduce collaboration. They just felt that in the integrated approach right now, there's a lot of really good conversations happening between teachers in terms of how that class is taught. And I think the biggest piece is that our teachers are, they are the experts. They are the ones that are they're talking with colleagues across other districts. And the trend is that the future of math is becoming more integrated and not less. So for all of these reasons, the recommendation with both high schools is that we stay with the integrated math model. So this kind of just outlines some of the key pieces of their decision making. So we talked about how it better supports the standards for mathematical practices. We talked about how the retention rate, so for example, it avoids the geometry gap. So forgetting algebra is inherent in the AGA model. They also discussed how switching to AGA would require significant curriculum rewriting and we think the curriculum work is hard now. Adding a whole new model would be really, really, really challenging. And then also looking at staffing, it prevents siloing teachers into specific subjects. So it does foster collaboration. So our high schools are recommending that we stick with the integrated math model because it does offer the best structural foundation for our students. And then finally, this is just, I kind of already talked about this, but the high school has also acknowledged, both high schools acknowledge that there is going to be a lot of work in terms of making the integrated math model the way it should be. And so these are some of the things that they've identified that would be needed in order to continue that work. I don't know if there's any, I'm sorry, but it's mindful.
Great. So we can go to questions. I want to give us a time check. It's 9:30. So if we can keep our questions and our comments tight, that would be great. Start with Victor and Linda.
Sure. I think my question's pretty quick. Do certain of the curriculums that were being tested, are some better aligned or worse aligned, if you will, to integrated versus AGA?
The two programs, most of the programs that are coming out now have both versions, traditional and integrated. Oh, so we piloted 2 integrated versions, both Carnegie Learning and they're integrated.
Got it. Thank you.
I'll try to be rapid fire. The curriculum that was evaluated for CPM and for Carnegie, was that the integrated model or the traditional? So they were already, both of them were validated. Got it. That's helpful. Thank you. And then the tension that you articulated, which I'm just trying to think through, is integrated seems like it's supported by a lot of the educators with whom we worked. Also more complex, takes a lot more time to implement. We've got this, you know, tension of time that we're still wrestling with. We just have a lot of. I'm careful again that we don't run into similar problems as the so-called mixed level kind of thing. That's what's sort of haunting me, right? To some extent, is these are tricky things to blend when you do these domains. You actually articulated in one of the slides I thought was really on part, which is that a lot of our parents, I think, are familiar with older Soviet, Russian, East Asian methods. Some of the Singaporean, you know, ones they have a much more homogeneous kind of community, so it's a little bit of a different, in my opinion, operating model. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, or maybe it's just a comment. If we decide to go down the integrated math approach, I think when it's April or some other time, we need to spend a lot of time to explain to people why this is the particular case. It is a challenge of the community to explain that this is not just the, you know, the hot, sexy new thing, that this is, that there are these, you know, reasons behind it. It was a little interesting to me that on the one hand, you talk about the academic consensus, talking about spiraling. I agree with that. But on the other hand, we so acknowledge that, you know, traditional has, I think, historically been better for SAT and ACT type, you know, standardized, if you would, performance, but integrated is in theory a little bit better for blended understanding. So there are going to be trade-offs, I think, fundamentally that we have to articulate in that process. All right, thanks.
I guess I would just add that Newton has been doing an integrated curriculum for over 30 years. So I always hear, well, back in previous generations, it was rigorous and awesome and amazing, and we're not there. So there is a really strong history of that. And I am just going to challenge you on the comment that you just made about the integrated approach not doing as well with standardized assessments. Actually, some of the research is that they get more standards earlier that actually allow them to be successful on some of those high standards scenarios, and has a layup into things like physics placement and other science courses that they get earlier. I sent you all the Pollinara report here, which will also tell you that the integrated gives some exposure faster to kids for some of the summer camps that they're trying to vie for in our region, which that was the Pollinara report opened my eyes to that, just what kind of camps are looking for what kind of math knowledge. So just some interesting stuff in your inbox. You get a minute to read it.
Sounds like good bedtime reading. And then last, I guess, point is there's a classic thing you're going to hear back from the community is going to be, oh, rigor, right? And again, we don't always agree on what rigor means, but that's been sort of the traditional oversimplification of, oh, integrated math, much more blending, but then you lose the opportunity to go in depth with some of these.
It's the same standards, right? So like that's.
Yep.
They're just in a different
order.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks for walking through I actually did enjoy all the little detailed bullets that you didn't read. I think it's really helpful to understand and for the community. And I think I'd applaud especially what seemed to be a very participative process with your colleagues. And it really does resonate to have the history of implementing it, even if, you know, I think we can acknowledge that if we're more comfortable with something we grew up in, you want to question it. And there clearly are some pros and cons. I was a little bit confused with some of the language here around current isolated units, the need for significant redesign vis-a-vis, if I'm understanding it correctly, the Carnegie and the CPM curricula that are designed to be integrated. And so are those comments relative to self-reflection, what's happening in Newton and not the curriculum, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's more based on what they've experienced thus far. I don't think it was connected to a pilot unit. Not all of the high school teachers were piloting. So these conversations happened throughout the fall with the high school teams, and the pilots happened in November and January. So I think it's separate from that. And really the feedback from the teachers was, we're curious, we want to talk about it and make sure that we're all understanding what it is, what the options are, and that we agree. And that's ultimately what happened when they did agree. But the things that came out of it, loud and clear from both schools, was we need clear scope and sequences for each course, whatever the course may be. We don't have that now. And we need more professional learning, professional development on what does integrated look like in its true form. I mean, they all said this very clearly.
Yeah. So like on slide 21, it looks like the Scarborough's rope of math. on integrated math. And so in theory, not to say that it's perfect or we don't need to tailor it, but in theory, that is not the box curriculum, but like the resources that we're putting in front of teachers for them to adapt and
Yes.
tailor. Thank you. That's really helpful. And then when we're doing the pilots, do we think those units that are, because I think we said they were individual units being piloted, are those the isolated units or are those the mixed up Scarborough's Rope units?
Those are integrated, it's a unit from an integrated curriculum program.
So if I'm like playing it back correctly, across the course of that month or some number of weeks, I'm seeing some algebra and some geometry and some that are integrated in that way as a student.
In theory, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. This is a ton of work. Thank you to the educators who have worked with you to put it together. I think you're all sort of still in the thick of it. So know that the community really appreciates what you guys are all doing and all the educators that are doing this.
So we're happy to end unless you want to hear before the parent meeting about the 8th grade placement test, the skip test. if
One
you will.
slide. One slide. Let's finish, please. This is the little.
Everybody's a little slap happy.
Okay, the high school math 2 honors assessment will be an opt-in, whereas the algebra readiness at the end of grade 7 is an opt-out. So students who are interested in taking an assessment to decide whether they want to basically skip math 1 as a 9th grader, which will shift down over the years, but we're talking about next year, can opt into a test in the spring, and we'll have a similar process to what we've developed for algebra readiness.
That's it. That's it.
That's it.
Well, we really appreciate the time to explain it all. I think it's important that the community heard from us, and we'll see you in the spring for the curriculum adoption recommendation.
Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. Thank you.
You.
Mika.
So April 2nd, you're having a community meeting or something. Yep. I'm assuming you're going to have multiple points of pushing the information out, building off of that meeting. And for folks who were there, for folks who weren't there, catching them up to speed, because there's a lot of interest.
We're going to start with sending some of this out to families and start right away.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're adjourned.
Similar sound. This is my new old lady back problem.
Well, I have to ask Aisha about that thing. I hate that. You know the thing she has in her office?
Yep.
Yeah, I need a link to that.
Thank you.